We ready to get started, Martha?
We are.
Okay. Am I advancing slides or somebody else?
I am.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the CalPADS information meeting. I feel like we should have that like basketball song. Dun, 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 right? Good morning. If that didn't wake you up, nothing will. So the presentation today can be downloaded from the CSIS website at csis.fcmat.org/resources. So if you have not downloaded a copy of the presentation, it is available there. We're also live streaming on YouTube today. So this recording will be available via YouTube as well. So remember, you've got some options in Zoom. First of all, your Q&A button should be at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to ask a question, please place your question in the Q&A. And it does say address questions to the panelists, but I do know that sometimes everybody else likes to see the questions as well. So if you'd like everybody else to see your question and the associated answer, then you can select panelists and attendees. If you're having issues with your audio, you cannot hear me now, so it's not going to make any difference. But if the connection is a little spotty, just make sure to go to audio settings and you can actually dial in by phone by clicking leave computer audio. So what we'd like you to do, generally the Q&A gets really full really quickly. There are 1,000 people on this webinar. So if you would be so kind as to try and hold your questions to the end of each relevant section so that we can kind of go through all of those questions and try and address them at the end of each section when we're taking questions. And I did cover, you can either select presenter or panelists and attendees if you want everybody else to see the question and answer. There are some questions we're not going to be able to get to today, so you can send in a service ticket if you'd like, if you don't get your question answered and you need an answer right away. But we will try to go through them and develop some sort of frequently asked questions after the webinar is over. Here are our presenters today: the administrator of the CalPADS Operations Office, Mr. Glenn Miller; Paula Mishima, administrator of the Educational Data Management Division. I am Brandy Howdige. I'm the technical lead, the information systems analyst for the CalPADS Operations Office. And then from FCMAT, we have the fabulous client services architect, Angela Ratty, and the amazing Martha Friedrich, the client service officer. So with that, we want to go through the agenda. We're going to do some general CDE updates. Glenn's going to give you some updates. We're going to go through general submission updates and changes. So for 2021, we're going to go through changes in Fall 1. We are going to give you a 10-minute break. So looking forward to that, I'm sure. We're going to go through Fall 2 changes, the submission process, planning for end of year for 2021, and then looking forward to 21-22, planning for student test settings in CalPADS. And then finally, Angela and Martha are going to give you the CalPADS support update. Here are some resources. So all of the latest information on COVID-19, any guidance that the department puts out can be found at the link at the top. So www.cde.ca.gov/LS/HE/HN/coronavirus.ASP. Also, the guidance with respect to tracking daily participation and weekly engagement for distance learning can be found at that web address. And then finally, all of our flashes can be found at the CalPADS page, CDE website, in the flash section. So make sure you reference that after the sim if you need additional information.
Glenn, did you want me to, were you ready for those or did you want me to do those?
Well, you can do it. You can do it, Paula.
I think we have Glenn on the really fun issue of performance. This is Paula Mishima, and I'm just gonna we're gonna tag team it this time between myself, Glenn, Brandy, Angela. Okay, so you won't have to hear one voice all the time. I did want to mention on the slide about reference to resources. That middle reference is fairly new, so if you haven't seen that, it's the department's latest guide on, I'm sure your favorite topic of LEA tracking daily participation and weekly engagement. So you might want to look for that document. It's a really hard document to find from our main web coronavirus page. So I actually put the URL right there. And then also, we are trying to do a better job of first providing you information in flashes before we present them on the sim. So anytime we've already done that, we put the flash that the topic is in so you can refer back to that. And so for some of those topics, we're not going to go into a lot of detail because they've already been discussed in a flash. So hopefully that kind of helps it. And it will, and for any topic that we haven't yet covered in a flash, we'll try to follow up with a flash. Okay, so going back to CDE updates, a very quick update on personnel. The CalPADS office is the CalPADS operations office, and Glenn Miller is the administrator of that office. We're in the educational data management division, which is in the instruction and measurements branch. And we just wanted to let you know we have a new deputy for the instruction measurement branch, Rachel Maves, who comes, I believe, from Sonoma County Office of Ed. I believe that's correct. But she has some LEA experience, so we're really happy to have her here at the department. So I'm not going to talk a lot about COVID-19 and CalPADS, mostly because for CalPADS, there are no changes. No changes to the STAS file, no changes to the course file. We did provide guidance about how to populate some of the fields on those two files that are impacted, but there are no changes to the files themselves. So refer to Flash 187 for that guidance. I know one question that does keep coming up that we did not provide specific guidance on, and is that is how to populate the course section file for end of year, given that, you know, for fall 2, you do whatever happens to be on census day, but fall end of year gets a little bit more complicated because hopefully there'll be a lot of changes of kids coming back for in-person instruction and so forth. So we will be providing instruction, some guidance for end of year as we get a little bit closer. Okay, and just as a reminder, the data that is collected this year in 2021 will be used for the 2021 dashboard. The data that you all submitted this past year for 1920, there will be no dashboard. However, we are required to post any data that we believe are valid and reliable on DataQuest, but those determinations have not been made yet as to what will be posted from 1920. Okay, next slide. I'm not, as I said, I'm not going to go a lot into the guidance on distance learning record keeping requirements. Do refer to the posted document. I will say that I know a lot of you are looking forward to what the audit guide will say about that. They are just starting, they'll start meeting for the first time this month, and we'll meet through January to come up with what will be in the audit guide for participation and engagement tracking. So we'll try to keep you abreast as to what's going on with that, but we're not really involved in that process, but we will track it for you and report out as information comes out. Next slide. Okay, so turning to, we first, before we start talking about 2021, we just want to, take a minute to say congratulations for the 1920 submissions. It was a very challenging year, obviously, with COVID happening kind of right before end of year, but you all did it. Almost everybody, 99.9%, I think, of LEAs actually certified. And this end of year was particularly challenging also because we added the special ed collection with the end of year 4. So we very much appreciate your work, and we know that it was a very challenging year. Okay, so I'm going to now turn it over to Glenn for some general updates.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Paula. So I get the happy part of the session. ironically, no. So one of the things that we've been tracking between service tickets and also on the listserv has been, the system performance for CalPads. And CalPads is a little over 12 years old at this point. And it was designed for a very specific purpose. And over the past 12 years, a lot has been asked. And so, like with many systems that were designed for a purpose at the beginning, we really didn't plan for kind of the continued growth and continued demands on the system. And so we are seeing performance issues. The department and CSIS are working together on kind of continually to improve the system in the process. We do have in our development roadmap to have a fairly significant redevelopment of how CalPads consumes data. That will eliminate or greatly reduce the performance issues that we're seeing today. But it's a major project. We've been working on it. So I joined the department 2 years ago. We've been working on it for a little over 2 years. And with the Cradle to Career initiative, it's moved to the top of the list, and it's no longer a part-time project, but essentially almost a full-time project for specific development staff. And said as we're continuing to work with CSIS and with CDE developers to find enhancements in the system today to reduce the performance. Thank you. I didn't have to call next slide. So what we're asking is to give you all a little bit of background about me. My wife was a CalPads administrator about 10 years ago. And so I feel like we're back to where we were 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when CalPads first started, where we really need to look at overnight processing, just being very, very patient for things to happen. And I know that what it does to the time crunch issues and what it does to you, having lived through it as a spouse and then later living through it as either a contractor to CDE or working for CDE, we know how critical it is. But we're counseling patients, allowing for plenty of time, just to allow the process to work through. And so you don't need to submit a service desk ticket, but if you do, because again, we're aware of it, we're watching it, we have people watching the system, be as specific as possible what you are doing at that point. And that helps anybody who's looking at the system going back through and kind of doing an after action or trying troubleshooting, kind of exactly following your steps, what you're doing. So good thing for me, I only have these 2 slides today, but we are looking at it. We are actively looking at it. We probably talk about this every other day inside the department about what can we do and what does it look like and how do we move forward? How do we make it better? So, but again, we appreciate your support in everything you're doing. And I think now we're cutting over to Martha, right? No?
Still Paula.
Back to me.
Still Paula, all righty.
Okay, so thank you, Glenn. That was hopefully helpful in terms of knowing what folks can expect. So turning to the 2021 submissions and the deadlines, we did send these out in the back to school letter. They're posted also on our website. So we have not changed the deadlines much from the past years. So hopefully these are of no surprise. The certification deadline is hopefully right before Christmas so that folks can have a little bit more relaxed holiday. Just reminding folks there's no certification deadline for fall 2. Instead, it's just the close of the amendment window. And kind of that's about it. I think I don't remember last year we had the certification deadline for end of year, but that again is reinserted because we find that it really helps move the submissions along. This is just another visual presentation that hopefully will help you in how all of these submissions kind of go together. We've added here the cohort processing, as well as a few other pieces of information that you probably should remember as you go through the year. So I'm really not going to speak to this slide, but hopefully it will help you kind of plan ahead.
I do want to say something just briefly. Just looking at this, you can see that, your activities in CalPads is almost year round. And something that catches people off guard is that we really want you to have the highest quality of data in December when you do that initial certification, because even though you have the month of January for your Fall 1 amendment, Fall 2 starts, and you don't have much time. And so if you're still using the whole month of January working on Fall 1, then Fall 2 is going to fall behind. So you really have to plan accordingly and coordinate well that you can be successful with both Fall 1 and Fall 2. So it's kind of the same with cohort and EOI, multitasking.
Okay, so I just wanted to quickly touch on some of the general submission changes, which are mostly all referred to in Flash 191. I know there was some chatter on the in the chat box before we started regarding preferred name. So if you can submit your specific question there, but just remember that the preferred name, and we have talked to your the vendors a lot about this. This is a new field. It's on the student information file, and it's used for one specific purpose, and that is when we provide the data over to our assessment vendor to populate their test administration systems, we provide them the preferred name, the preferred first name instead of the legal name. That, and the reason for that being that when folks locally look at the, like Tom's and so forth, they see the name of this that the student wants to basically be referred to, and not their legal name. If they had a name, you know, some sort of change and they haven't changed their legal name. So that's the only reason we're at this point we're collecting the preferred name. Your vendors understand the purpose and are hopefully pulling from your local student information system the appropriate name field. So I know there was some question about how to change that preferred name. So if you can write your specific question in the chat, we'll try to answer it at the end of this segment, or through a service ticket. We'll see what the question is. There was a lot of discussion about the student exit category code change. Initially, when that change happened, the chatters kind of calmed down on that. So hopefully folks are kind of getting used to the new use of E450. We are still in discussions about possibly changing that to include kindergarten, but that change probably won't be made this year. There's a new tribal foster program. Again, refer to that Flash, and the Flash has a link to some more programmatic information about how to go about working with your tribal councils and so forth to get that data. And finally, there's a new English language acquisition status code for adult English learner. There's a very specific definition for adult English learner as to what students this should be used for. So it probably won't impact a lot of you. Okay, the next slide. This is just a reminder that legislation passed that now requires charter school teachers to get to basically have credentials, but the first step in that is this year they need to have a statewide educator ID from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. So when they apply for a certificate of clearance with CTC, which is the first step, they will receive a seed at that point. They still have some time to get all the appropriate credentials, but this year they do need to acquire a seed. So for the charter schools, just a reminder that your teachers should be requesting a certificate of clearance from CTC in order to get a seed. Then finally, as you all know, that there's been a change to the submission of the EL and IFEP statuses. You can no longer submit those statuses directly to CalPADS. They will come directly from the assessment vendor after the student completes the initial LPAC, and it's loaded into CalPADS. This process just started, opened up in the middle of August, and we had a few issues that we've dealt with. But this is just a reminder that you can no longer submit the EL or IFEP records to CalPADS, and you cannot delete the EL or IFEP records that were loaded to CalPADS by the assessment vendor. Also to remind you that you should implement business processes to download those ELASs that are coming from the assessment vendor and are in CalPADS to load them into your local student information systems on an ongoing basis. Okay, next slide. Oh, you know, hopefully we've come up with a short-term solution to address this, but it would be very, very helpful to you all to avoid creating MIDs, especially for those kindergarten students. We have found that there's some LEAs that appear to be just assigning kindergartners seeds when they actually are SSIDs when they already have one in the system. So it's really important to first look for your kindergarten students to see whether or not they already have an SSID in the system before asking for a new SSID. If you don't do that and you create a bunch of MIDs, you're going to kind of cause a bit of havoc for your LPAC results that will need a little bit of cleaning up. So just again, a reminder to avoid those MIDs. Okay, good. Okay, so that was kind of a summary of the general submission changes. Now moving to Fall 1 specifically. We have some changes to certification reports that were summarized in Flash 191 and are summarized on the next two tables. So since we've already put these out in a Flash, I'm not going to really go through these tables one by one. Mostly I created this table to just give you one visual place to go look if you can't remember exactly, okay, now what's being certified during Fall 1. But the main things I would emphasize is that the one-year graduate and the one-year dropout, there's no certification of those data this year. You all already certified one-year graduate and one-year completer counts during the prior year end of year submission. We will be using just the one-year dropout counts to meet our federal reporting requirements, but we will not be posting those on DataQuest. The other main change is that we're moving the LIP, whether or not the LIP report, which are EL students and the language instruction program that they're participating in, that moved from Fall 2 to Fall 1, which we hope helps you. That was actually something you all suggested, and it did make a lot more sense. And the other major change is that this year for Fall 1, you will be required to certify student with disabilities services, which you just did in end of year 4. So hopefully you have a little bit of experience with that. Okay, so going over in a little bit of detail, this again was in a Flash 191, is some of the changes that we made in report 1.17, which is the FRPM English Learner Foster Youth Report used for developing the unduplicated pupil count, which is used in determining funding under the supplemental and concentration grants for LCFF. We made the changes in CalPAD so you all don't have to worry about, changing start dates and end dates to get kids included. So I think if you can go to the next slide, which is table that summarizes, summarizes the changes as well as is comprehensive in that it talks about all the different pieces that are in that report. So the one with X's in that last column, eligibility to date for 2021 only, are the changes that we made for this year only. Just a little bit on the 181 and 182, and I think, Martha, you can go to the next slide where we talk about this more specifically. Oh, no, I'm sorry, go back to the table. Our Nutrition Services Division just sent out communication to your food services folks that the exemption that or the waiver that the federal U.S. Department of Agriculture provided so that the rules for the summer meals program applied through December, which meant that you didn't have to do any applications for NSLP through December. They just extended that to June 2021, which means that for this full year, your food service folks will be operating lunch and breakfast programs based on the summer meal requirements, which do not require applications. So just letting you know that the LEAs this year then will not be collecting any NSLP applications. They have not yet received guidance from USDA about what to do for those LEAs who are in a base year for a provision. Because in the base year of a provision, for those who are operating programs off of a provision, they need to collect applications in those years. So there'll be guidance forthcoming about that. Unfortunately, here in California, we use the NSLP application as a proxy for low income or LCFF determinations. And so right now, our guidance is that you should be collecting the alternative household income form for students in order to have them get a free meal or reduced price meal record in the system for LCFF purposes. I would remind folks, though, that if your kids are directly certified, if they're homeless, if they're foster, or if they're migrant, they already qualify. So they don't need an alternative household income form. But any other students who aren't already eligible in those ways would need one if you want to have them included in the unduplicated pupil count. And then we know that that's not necessarily convenient to try to figure out which students you need to target, but just letting folks know that for LCFF purposes, students only need to be eligible in one way. Same way with English learners. If a student is English learner, that qualifies them for UPC and does not, they wouldn't need, a free or reduced price meal record.
Paula, we've got a bunch of questions popping up in the chat about provision schools.
Okay.
And what they need to do. So can you address that so I can clear these questions?
Okay. I think the answer is we don't know yet. And I talked to our nutrition services folks yesterday, and they said they're waiting for guidance. So they don't know yet what to tell folks. Obviously, if you're USDA and you just told everybody you don't need to collect applications this year, it seems like they would then provide some sort of, exemption to, or, hold off doing a base year or something. We don't know, but bottom line is we'll let you know as soon as we find out, and hopefully USDA will let us know very soon, since they just put out this extended waiver. I think that was announced last Friday. Is that it?
Paula, but
Yeah.
the collection of the alternative income information forms can be collected through December 31st.
Correct. For
Okay.
this purposes, we haven't changed that December 31st date. You have until December 31st, and to get those records in, you don't have to mess with the start dates. CalPADS will automatically pull in any 181 or 182 record with a start date, through December 31st.
And Paula, so just to be clear, there's, and I'm not talking about CEP schools, I'm talking about regular schools now. Their status from last year does not carry over to this year, correct? It has to be redetermined in the new academic year for traditional schools?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the only time it does carry over technically is when you've already been in you passed the base year for provision schools. And then that status would carry over for continuing students, right?
Correct.
Traditional schools, their status for free and reduced price meals has to be reestablished.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So again, when we find out more from USDA and our Nutrition Services Division, we'll provide guidance about that. The other change of note here is for English learners. Legislation was passed that added 45 days to the 30 days that are required, that you must test a student in the initial LPAC. So to accommodate that, we've moved that eligibility date through. It has to be on or before November 13th, and it will be included in the UPC. Okay. So if we go to the next slide, Martha. So folks ask this question a lot because obviously now we have a certification deadline December 18th, which is before the December 31st date that you're allowed, that we will count the NSLP records. So, but basically what you should do is certify by that first deadline, December 18th. If you do that, anyone who approves by that date, we will provide a preliminary look at your unduplicated pupil count. And we use that data for the first principle apportionment P1 calculation. So it's really important to get your data approved, hopefully certified by the December 18th deadline. Then when the window opens, the amendment window opens, just look at your data. If there's more students that end up being included for UPC, you should go ahead and decertify and then recertify, because the data that you certified by the close of the amendment window, January 29th, that is what we use for the second principal apportionment for P2. Okay, so really there's still lots of reasons to get your data done by that December 18th deadline. Okay, so I think I will now turn it over to Angela for some more interesting live demo stuff.
Okay, thanks, Paula. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
I'll answer for everybody. I can see it.
That's all I needed, just one confirmation. Okay, so I'm going to cover some of the changes that Paula went over, as well as just some things that common issues that we have on the service desk. So I'm going to start with report 1.17, and those of you who are good at doing your data analysis and really interrogating your reports, often what you do is look at your socioeconomically disadvantaged counts on report 1.1 and compare that to 1.17, and where that trips people up often is that for LCFF reporting, students who are not age 5 by December 2nd are not included on the LCFF 1.17 report, but they are included on 1.1. And so the 1.17 report has an age eligibility filter, and it defaults to LCFF. But if you want to compare it to your 1.1 socioeconomic count, one thing you have to do is change that filter to all, and then they should align. The other thing that's going to be a little bit tricky this year is that Paula mentioned the ELAS is now extended through November 13th to identify your students who are English learners. And so we've made that accommodation on 1.17. So anybody who is enrolled on Information Day and is identified as an English learner prior to November 13th will be included on this report. But when you drill down to 1.18, there's a little bit of a hiccup, and I'm going to show you. So here at Alameda High, I have 5 English EL funding eligible students. But when I drill down to 1.17, and you have to pardon me, I'm in our test environment here, and there are duplicates. If I count just the distinct students, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is great. That matches. But one of my kids that is an English learner, the ELAS is empty. And that's because if I go look up that student, oh, sorry, I thought I had all my windows open. Oops. So this student was enrolled on Information Day, and they are an adult English learner, but my status date is 10/10. So they are EL funding eligible, but that 1.18 report only reports what they were as of information day. So it's going to be a little bit tricky reconciling that report. The other thing we wanted to point out to you is on 1.17 is there's the new column for tribal foster youth. And again, to emphasize, this is some information you give us. This is not identified at the state level. So these students will not be on your 5.7 foster report. So you tell us using that code 193, and Flash 186 goes into detail about how you go about working with your tribal partners to identify those students. Okay, so if you are looking at your certification screen, you'll notice that there's a couple aggregate reports that are gone. If you went to training, you know already what those are. 1.6 and 1.9, the grad and drop reports are no longer certified in Fall 1. Grads are now certified as part of end of year 3. But there are also some additions. 2.14 was moved from, that's your lip count, from Fall 2 to Fall 1. And for Fall 2 last year, we did not have a detailed report. 2.15 student list, and so that is available now in your supporting reports. And then last Fall 1, we started off with 16.5, and it ended up being moved off of the certified reports because we were having some issues with student services for students with disabilities. And we think through EOI and testing and all of that, we've gotten all that squared away. So these are back on the menu for certification.
Angela?
Yeah.
They're asking if the issue that you just pointed out on 1.18, is that being fixed?
Well, so I called somebody from our requirements team last night, wondering that myself. And the answer was no, that was the decision that was made as a team, that 1.18 was going to just show the designation as of census day. Unless you have any further info, Brandy.
No, I do not.
Okay, then the last thing I wanted to go over is your strategy for Fall 1, right? So our deadline is December 18th, and I want to walk through this scenario with you because of this COVID business, we have different rules for identifying free and reduced eligible students. So let's say you have all of your data in good shape and you certify early December, you're good, and you don't plan on doing anything else. Well, what we would recommend is that come January, after the direct cert loads for the first week of January, run your program file out of your student information system and put that in CalPads in case you have any new identified eligible students for free or reduced lunch, and see if you'll pick up any new students from direct certification. And you'll want to compare your 1.17 from your certified revision to your revised uncertified. And here's where people run into trouble. When you come to the certification screen, it defaults to your, not necessarily your most recent revision, there's a hierarchy. And so if you have an approved copy or a disapproved copy, that's what's going to show. And so we can see that in my example here is that I approved this at one point, but my SELPA has disapproved. But I want to look for my most recent revision. So it's nested inside of this. I have to go fishing for it here. So we're going to do that together because what happens is people tend to recertify their old copy. We've had that happen several times, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to make sure you're selecting your most recent. So when I drill down, it comes to my disapproved copy. I see that I want to make note of my revision date is 10/12, but I'm looking for my most recent copy. And so I have to wait a minute. This is where the tricky part is. This page takes a few ticks to load. And so you can see in my corner of the screen here that it's waiting. There it goes. So my page refreshed, and I can verify that because I have a new revision create date. And then what I would do next is I would look at all of my reports. I did this morning, so you didn't have to sit through it, but these normally would have a red X, and so I'd have to look at all my reports and make sure they're accurate before I would have the option to reapprove this copy of my snapshot. And so that's going to be a likely scenario for you, right? You want to make sure you capture the most eligible students on your LCFF. And so we anticipate that there will be a lot of LEAs certifying by the deadline and then using that amendment window to approve a more recent copy of your revision. And finally, you want to check your status down here under snapshot history. We can see the activity that yesterday my SELPA disapproved. I did some work last night, and then I have a new revision, and it was approved by me at 9:40 a.m.
So Angela, this is Paula. Even if they don't actually upload their direct cert from January, 1.17 is being adjusted this year to automatically load those into that 1.17 report. So they can just mostly look to see, they can also just look to see whether or not there are changes in that report. Is that correct?
Yes, but my understanding is if they identify locally any students who are eligible for free and reduced, right? They would have to upload that student program file in order for us to reflect that. So it's a combination of the two sources, right? So
I just wanted to make sure folks knew that we were automatically loading in the direct cert data for December and January.
Right. So even if you don't send up a new program file, it'll be a good exercise that first week of January to go look at your most recent revision to see if direct cert pulled in any extra students.
And just to kind of be clear, because we keep getting the same question over and over, folks, the extension of the dates for free and reduced price meals and ELs means that for English learners, it means that their English language acquisition status start date can be all the way up to 11/13, but that student had to have been enrolled on information day. That's the key. They had to have been enrolled on October 7th, but their EL start date can be on or before 11/13. For free and reduced price meals, they had to have been enrolled on information day, but their program record start date, so 181, 182 start date, can be on or before December 31st.
And Sandy's asking if direct cert picks up any extra students, do they have to recertify? And the answer is yes. If you want to have those students included in your official LCFF counts, you would have to recertify that more recent revision. So you need to get to SELPA approved for Fall 1 for that report to be officially certified.
There's another question that keeps coming up. So remember, it's about the LIP programs, the language instruction programs. Folks, our program records have kind of always worked the same way, meaning if the student actually attends a new school, those program records are school specific. So if they move within a district from one school to another and they're still in a language instruction program, you need to submit a new LIP record at the new school because our program records are school specific. So if you want them represented at that school within the academic year, you need to submit a new LIP. The start date of that LIP program can be the original start date.
Right, and if they haven't moved, then you don't have to. Right, Brandy? I mean, that's the way our eligibility program records work.
Leave them open if they stay at the same school.
Right.
The question I'm getting is, do you have to close them at the prior school? You don't have to, you can, but we don't require it.
Correct.
The other thing, so hopefully I answered a lot of those. And Rebecca's saying, can you repeat what you said about December 31st for NSLP? So remember, what they're looking at and what Angela just walked you through in report 1.7 and 1.18 is the first thing you're looking at is, was the student enrolled on October 7th? If they were enrolled on October 7th, they can have a free and reduced price meal record of 181 or 182 with a start date on or before December 31st, and those students will count in report 1.17. Now, again, remember the initial certification date is December 18th. So if you have students that you're collecting applications for and whose start dates for NSLP are after December 18th, you're going to want to decertify and recertify.
Martha, can you go back to slide 26?
Let's see.
It summarizes what how all these different programs are being counted this year.
Right. And yes, SELPAs will need to reapprove, guys. So you have to kind of build in your timelines, work your timelines out so that the SELPA will have an opportunity to reapprove it.
I'd like to say something about that 1.18 where Angela indicated the ADEL wouldn't necessarily show up there on the 1.18. The ADEL is only usually used in a few schools. It's not a widespread code used throughout the state. Isn't that correct, Brandy?
Yeah, that's correct, Martha. But so the issue is that now that ELAS or EL and IFEP are only coming from LPAC results, when I'm creating test data, I can't add an EL record, but I can add an ADEL record, and so I had to. That's why I use that version. I would have preferred to use an EL with a date after census date, but I don't know how to make LPAC happen.
I just didn't want people to freak out about 1.18. It's going to be rare where the numbers won't necessarily jive.
Well, it's anybody who is identified as English learner or adult English learner who was enrolled on Information Day, but they were identified as that status between October 7th and November 13th. That column will be blank on 1.18.
Okay.
And so a lot of folks are also saying, so we're going to end up with 2 open language instruction program records at 2 different schools. Folks, you can close them out at the first school if you want to. We don't require that you do because it's an eligibility record, and that's kind of always been the case. But you can close them if you'd like.
CalPADS knows how to count them correctly.
Right. And with respect to the adult English learners, folks, those I want to be really clear about this because I get service tickets about this all the time. Are adult English learners are students with disabilities in transition? No, that's not these kids. These particular kids usually attend charter schools that have federal partnerships with the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Youth Build, Job Corps, California Conservation Corps. And those charters can serve students of any age, okay? We've seen students all the way up to 80 years old in CalPADS enrolled at these charter schools. And you would think that they have an adult grade level, and they don't. They have a K-12 grade level because they are enrolled at a K-12 charter school. Unfortunately, they don't qualify for Title III funding. They don't qualify for Title III services. They cannot take the LPAC. They cannot take the summative LPAC. So we have to put them in a different category because what they do qualify for is unduplicated pupil percentage funding for LCFF, okay? So adult English learners are specific to counting in UPP. Everywhere else in CalPADS where you see English learner, those students will not be counted because they don't qualify for Title III funding or services.
Thanks for clarifying that, Brenda.
Right. But the students do count for LCFF funding, so that's why they're in this report.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Are we ready to move on, or do we want to just take some questions?
No, I think, do we have more questions? Before you start on the very fun topic of special ed?
Let's see. Yeah, the LIP program is generating lots of so folks, again, just for language instruction programs, what we're collecting is, are students eligible for the language instruction program? So it follows eligibility rules. So the start date can be before the student's enrollment start date at the school. When they move schools, you will need to submit a new language instruction program for them. Just like if they move schools, you have to submit a new free and reduced price meal program for them, right? So you need to make sure you do that. Do ADEL students need a LIP program? No, they do not. So again, these students do not qualify for Title I services or funding. So therefore, we do not require that adult English learners have a language instruction program. Now, having said that, if they're participating in one, you can submit it. We don't prevent you from doing that, but it's not required.
So Brandy, what's new this year is that it's now a fatal error if an EL student does not have a LIP, correct? That's what's different.
Correct.
The validation changed. Also, I saw chatter in the listserv about whether or not a secondary enrolled student needs to have a LIP if they're EL, and they do not per our requirements, folks. So if that's happening, we need to know that.
So also, Benet was asking whether or not SELPAs were told about the decertification. So Benet, we actually spoke directly to the SELPA directors. This was not we didn't communicate this through a CalPADS portal. We actually, along with the special education office, we had a meeting with all of the SELPA directors a week ago, and we did communicate that if there were additional FRPM certifications that had to be done after December 18th, that they would be required to decertify. Not required, but it's recommended that LEAs decertify and recertify. So they were notified of that. Okay. Also, folks are saying that they're getting errors if they're submitting 2 open program records. That only happens if they're at the same school. So remember, if you have a LIP program for a student last year and then they're attending the same school, you don't even have to submit one. You just leave that one open, okay? If you're going to submit one annually and reaffirm that they're participating, then you have to close the prior one and reopen it at the same school. But if they're attending different schools, you will not get that error. So, let's see. Any of you guys see anything else? If the student's ELAS changes from EL to ADEL before they're of age, does the EL record need to be removed for ADEL to go in? No. So Heidi, we know that there are some students that actually are enrolled in K-12 and they actually took the initial LPAC or the CELT, whatever, and then they transition to 22 years old. But what you will do is when you try and submit up an EL record for that student, CalPADS is going to force you to change it to adult English learner if they were 22 as of census day. So just be aware of that. You will eventually have to change that student's English language acquisition status to ADEL. There's also a frequently asked question on the FAQ site that tells you exactly how to determine the start date for an adult English learner.
So Brandy, I see one about the migrant ed eligibility, and I think people get confused because the student can be eligible for 3 years, and so they get errors stating that I have more than one record open. So isn't that a local practice of how they report that migrant ed? Meaning you don't have to create a program record every year because it's good for 3 years. However, you want to check every year, are they still migrant ed? And so you got to evaluate your local practices. Are you creating a new program record every year? If so, then you got to close out the previous one. You don't have to for migrant ed, but if that's the path that you go down, then you have to do the closing out manually if you're going to create one every year.
Okay. I think they are, so Heidi, go ahead and send in a service ticket about Cert 165. Okay, so are we ready to move on?
All right, and just to let folks know, we're going to go through special ed changes and then you'll get a break. Because we think you'll need one maybe after all the special ed stuff.
Okay, So,
Andy.
go ahead. Are we ready?
Yep.
All right. So we did implement some new validations for Fall 1. The first thing that you should know is we did discuss this with the special education vendors. And again, we did have a meeting directly with the SELPA directors last week, and we went over a lot of these validations. We actually took some of their feedback and we made some tweaks, or will be making some tweaks to a couple of these. But just kind of to go over them really quickly. SPED 538. Okay, first of all of these errors can be found in the newest version of the error list, which is posted both on the CalPATS homepage at the very bottom of the page. You can click the link to go to the error list, or you can reach the error list from the CDE systems documentation page. That the new version of the error list is posted there as well. So SPED 538 is the education plan amendment date cannot exist between the dates of another SPED record. So this generally happens either when an LEA forgets to affirm a particular version of an education plan, or when a student actually transfers to another LEA and the prior LEA makes changes to the existing education plan. So we're really kind of trying to tighten up these validations because of a lot of the issues that existed last year in terms of the reports not showing the correct record for a student were based on the fact that these dates within the records were very incongruent. Okay. SPED 539, special education meeting date cannot exist between or before the dates of another LEA's SPED record. So again, this is based on when students transfer to and from, and LEAs may have forgotten to affirm and send up a transaction. It causes issues for the next LEA, and it causes issues in terms of which record is going to show up on report 16.1 and 16.2. SPED 540 is special education program exit date cannot be populated for a triennial meeting. So this has caused a lot of angst because we do know that the purpose of a triennial meeting is to determine continued eligibility in the special education program. And a lot of times students are exited as a result of this. But what you should know is to try and minimize the confusion in terms of dates and records that need to be pulled into 16.1 and 16.2. We are not pulling in the triennial records for consideration in 16.1 and 16.2. Therefore, we need the exit date to actually be put on the most recent annual record, okay? Or if they haven't had an annual, it would be the initial record. So again, we're not pulling those triennial records in there, so we need that exit date to appear on the triennial. We are working with your vendors, and we are taking some feedback from some of the vendors on whether or not we would actually allow you to populate it both on the triennial and the most recent annual. But minimally, it has to be on the annual. And right now, the system only allows you to populate it on the annual or the initial record if a student exits. SPED 542, the SPED exit date has to be populated on the latest SPED record for the same student and education plan. So if you've got several records for a student, you've got their initial meeting, and then you've got subsequent amendments, it means that the exit date has to be populated on the most recent amendment for that education plan. SPED 543 is invalid field population for education plan type 700, 800, or 900. So those of you that are in the special ed realm know that 700, 800, and 900 means that the student will not be served on a special education plan. Okay, either the parent declined FAPE, or the student they were eligible, but the parent declined. They were eligible, but they're not going to receive services for any other reason, or they were ineligible. So all of those plan types do not need IEP plan components. And a lot of your systems are actually sending up plan components related to students who have these plan types of 700, 800, and 900. And so what we're asking is that you nullify all of those fields, which means they should be blank. You shouldn't be populating IEP plan components for these plan types. Next slide.
Just a minute. I was trying to answer some questions. Okay, there you go.
Okay, so we did have other validations that were released on September 29th and October 13th, which is actually today. So the first is invalid reporting LEA and school of attendance combination for charter LEA. So what is a charter LEA, first of all? A charter LEA is a charter school that has elected to become an individual member of a SELPA. So charter LEAs, or individual members of a SELPA, must report independently in CalPADS. So if you try to send up a SPED record or an SSRV record that represents the reporting LEA as the charter's authorizer and then the charter school, you're going to get an error. Okay, you have to be an independently reporting charter in CalPADS if you are a charter LEA or individual member of a SELPA. So that's the reason that you would get that error. SPED 544, disability 2 must be null if disability 1 is null. So a lot of the records that we saw last year were that the primary disability was blank and the secondary disability was coming up with a value of none. And it was causing a lot of issues. Or in some cases, you had secondary disability of another type and the primary disability was blank. So we're just tightening up those validations. So if disability 1 is null, then disability 2 must also be null or blank. SPED 546, the initial record, so the initial evaluation record cannot match annual records on meeting dates or education plan amendment dates. So you cannot hold an initial meeting and an annual meeting on the same date. It's not possible, okay? But we did see some of your records coming up that way. SPED 547, meeting and amendment date cannot be the same. I saw this really consistently, where you would hold a meeting and then the amendment date would be populated with the exact same date. And just again, logistically, that doesn't really make too much sense. CERT 167 and CERT 168 have to do with the fact that the U.S. Department of Education provided additional guidance on kindergarten students and which federal setting they actually belong in. So CERT 167 just validates that any kindergarten student that is at least 5 years of age has a general education participation percentage range code populated. So you have to tell us the percentage that they are in gen ed if they are a kindergartner in a regular classroom and they're at least 5 years old. Also, special education program setting code has to be populated, and there's a specific combination. So if they're a kindergartner, they're at least 5 years old, they have to have special education program setting with either regular class or a few other options depending on what their specific setting is. Okay. Next slide.
Before you go there, Brandy, could you speak to, we're getting a lot of questions about the certification errors, and will the special education data systems be informed of those errors? They are already received the SPED validation errors, the file validation errors back through the SEDS, but what about the certification errors?
So yes. So there is a subscription that they're being notified, hopefully within the next couple of days. Once the vendors receive that subscription, they will be receiving these certification errors. They will be coming back down electronically through the application program interface, the API, and directly into your systems. But what we did learn from SACE in particular yesterday was that they still have to kind of work through how they're going to display those errors in your systems, because remember, certification errors are different than input validation errors. Input validation errors usually are the direct result of data in SACE, okay? Certification errors can be the result of data in SACE, but it also looks at other things like the student enrollment record, okay? So it may not be an error in SACE per se. It may be something you have to work with your special ed or your student information system data coordinator to resolve. But that should happen, I'm hoping, within the next week.
And then there's a lot of questions on specific validations. So I don't know if you want to get to that or you want to continue on, Brandy.
I don't know, how are we doing on time?
Oh, it's 10 o'clock. I think we're doing okay. How about we finish this and then we take a look at those Q&As?
Sure. Okay, so CERT 136, 137, and 139 have been disabled. So this is good news for you guys because your late tries, your late annuals, those were clogging up your certification errors. You had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. We've disabled those certification validation errors, so you won't see those. But what that means is that you need to use your monitoring reports. Okay, those certification errors were put in place initially because we didn't have the monitoring reports available for you. Okay, the monitoring reports 16.7 and 16.8 are operational data store reports, which means they generate data based on current data, not necessarily certified data. So whatever is in the system, those data are generated in 16.7 and 16.8 on a daily basis. So those reports could change depending on whether or not you're submitting up special education transactions. You won't see those certification errors. Then we also made a change in a data element in the student enrollment file. Okay, remember, this is not something in the SPED file, but it is special education related, so we just want to let you know about it. So there used to be a field in the student enrollment record called post-secondary transition status indicator. Okay, that's data element 1.34. We changed the name to adult age students with disabilities in transition indicator. And that's because folks were confusing it with our post-secondary status file. And shoot, even we got confused sometimes. So the new name for it is adult age students with disabilities in transition. What has not changed is the definition. What does this mean? These are students with disabilities. Generally, they're 18 or older, between the ages of 18 and 21. They are enrolled in a K-12 school solely for the purposes of receiving transition services. They are no longer pursuing or completing coursework that will lead to a high school diploma, and they are technically in post-secondary transition, or they're adult age students with disabilities in transition. So if in fact your students meet that criteria, then you want to go in and mark them as post-secondary transition because it affects whether or not they get included in certain cohorts, the 4-year cohort and the DAS 1-year cohort. Susan loves the new name. Yes. Okay. Next slide.
Okay, so it's hard keeping up with you guys' questions, but the first one on the SPED IVRs, the question from Lucky was, will SPED 539 be updated so users do not need to submit meeting transactions in order by date?
And
I think that's, I know that we're working with the special ed vendors, right, to help get the records in order.
Right. You know, we, like I said, 538 and 539, we did have a specific conversation with SACE yesterday where she said that oftentimes this happens because LEAs don't affirm IEPs in a timely manner, and then they end up making changes to that and affirming a later version and then sending up the original transaction later. So I don't know exactly how that happens in your system, but to try and avoid that, talk to SACE, get some recommendations on how you can avoid that, because you will generate one of these errors if you do that. But she said specifically it had to do with the timeliness of affirming your IEPs.
So sorry. 538, I'm getting a student with a fatal error. We've had this since 2019. Why the error? I think you have to send in a ticket when you're asking on a specific fixed student. We need to see the background. Okay. How do we fix the 538, 539s? Typically, you got to work with your SEDS vendor, as Brandy just said. Can you speak to SPED 405? Student must be 5 years of age. It is my understanding this field was recently updated. It used to be ages 6 to 22 and has updated to TKK and higher. If we allow students to enter into the TK program at 4 years, 9 months, shouldn't CalPADS make adjustments to the validation of 4 years,
Actually, if
9
you go
months?
to the next slide, can you go to the next slide, Martha?
Yes. Whoops.
I think we address it in the next slide. Oh no, not this one. Okay, to hold that question, there we go. Okay, so we did make changes, and again, the U.S. Department of Education provided guidance on kindergarten students, because in years prior, kindergarten students were always put into early childhood settings. Okay, now it's different. So early childhood settings is your preschoolers, but now it also includes transitional kindergarten students that are less than 5 years old. Because remember, in CalPADS, transitional kindergarten students are kindergartners. But in this case, these are early TK kids that are 4 years old. Those students need to be placed in a regular early childhood program. Okay, so we made these changes to the definitions for the program settings. 400 was changed to include kindergarten students who are at least 5 years old. Okay, so that should address your question. So remember, TK kids that are 4 years old need to be placed in early childhood setting. And your SELPAs have been notified of this. Your vendors have also been notified of this.
So we have quite a few questions on the 540. So let me get to, if they chose both a 20/40 meeting type for that meeting, then error SPED 40 won't come up, correct?
So if you exit a student on a triennial, I believe in discussions with the vendors are going to try and help you do this. So it's not something, if you have a triennial and an annual on the same date, you want to, what some of the vendors are going to do is prompt you to enter the exit date on the annual and not necessarily the triennial. Some of them have also talked about allowing you to put it on the triennial and the annual, but not sending that date up to CalPADS. So you should talk to your vendor about how they're going to assist you in implementing this. But the idea is to try and make it as seamless as possible so that you don't really have to think about it too much, because we do know that you do exit kids as part of triennials.
And then Corey added that that Cert 161 and 540 caused a ton of issues last year because the exit date wasn't on the triennial. Does this mean that Cert 161 won't raise its ugly head? We are taking a look at that, and we're likely to adjust it, not looking at the triennial if we make those changes.
Yes.
I think we're pretty good for right now that we can take the break, and Brandy, you can take a look at any others that you think you have to address when we come back from our break.
So there was one more slide on the next one that I didn't cover. So if you just
Okay.
oh, right before that. Keep going back. One more back. There we go. This is really good news. So for those of you that are SELPAs, the SELPA reports role now has access to the following ODS extracts. Okay, so what that means, as a SELPA, I can go in there and download the ODS SPED, SSRV, and the District of Special Education Accountability extracts at a SELPA level. That means for all my members, which is really cool. Hopefully you guys are cheering. I can't hear you, but definitely know that these extracts are available for SELPAs now. Also, remember that report 16.5 has to be certified as part of Fall 1. We didn't make you certify it last year, but you are going to have to certify services as part of Fall 1 this year. Okay, last slide. Promise I'll get through it quick. Oop, we already covered this. All right, so we do have some new functionality. We talked about the certification errors that are going to be sent back down to your special education vendors directly through the API. So you should be able to see those hopefully within the next week or so. But also really super important, this is for CalPADS administrators as well as special education data coordinators. We added a column to the SSID extract. So when you obtain new SSIDs for students, or you want to get a base set of information on a set of SSIDs using a date range, you can actually download that extract, and we added a new column that uses information that's already in CalPADS to show you when a student enters your district on an active IEP, okay? So if that happens, the Student Information System Data Coordinator needs to find some mechanism to provide that information to your special education data coordinator so that that person can generate a transaction immediately after enrollment, okay? The other option, CalPADS administrators, is to teach them how to fish, meaning show them, give them the roles that they need, and show them how to download that extract themselves so they can get that information and get those transactions uploaded in their student or their special education data systems. But this will help you in identifying students with disabilities as soon as they enter. You don't have to wait for their CUMES, right? The information is already available to you in CalPADS. So I would really strongly urge you to start using this information in the SSID extract, which guess what, folks, means you have to talk to each other. Please establish a local process, and it will make things much easier for you. Okay, also coming soon, SELPA level monitoring reports. The SELPAs have been asking for SELPA level monitoring reports, and we are working on them, so they are coming. Stay tuned.
And that answered several questions in the Q&A.
Yes.
So Brandy's going to be starting off this next segment. Are you back, Brandy? Do you want to address any questions before we continue on with Fall 2?
I'm seeing, okay.
Anything major?
You know, with respect to triennials and annuals, so one of the things that Shiloh Bessaril did discuss with your SELPA directors was sort of process in terms of the things that should be occurring during a triennial versus things that should be occurring during an IEP meeting. And so this is, it's really important. One of the questions here was, well, what if we hold a standalone triennial meeting and the student services are amended during the triennial? So remember that all of the components of the IEP and related services should generally be discussed at an IEP meeting. And so the purpose of a triennial is solely to determine continued eligibility for the special education program. And so the special education's view is that even though you're calling it a standalone tri, if you're discussing things such as related services or services that will be delivered as part of the IEP that's implemented, then very likely you're holding some form of IEP meeting as well. So if you're changing the individualized education program for a student and their related services, then it would be advisable to either submit up an amendment to the existing annual record or to submit up a new annual record with the new meeting date. Okay, so and again, if you have an annual and a triennial that occur on the same day, and the student actually exits that program, your vendors will be assisting on populating the exit on the correct record. Okay, but if you have a standalone triennial that results in an exit, you will have to put the exit date on the most recent annual record so that it will pull into report 16.1 and 16.2. Let's see. a lot of these we'll probably have to address outside of this meeting because there's a lot of really, really specific questions.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. So let's start with fall 2 changes. And again, what we're going to try and get through the Q&A and see if we can respond to some of you directly. And then again, you do have the option of submitting a service ticket. So for fall 2 this year, we do have some new course codes. The majority of them are International Baccalaureate, so either IB math codes, and then a lot of them pertain to the IB middle years program. So if there were some IB codes that were retired, and so in the cases of the math codes, 9281 through 9284, those codes will replace the codes that are being retired, which we'll talk about in just a few seconds. So just be aware that they're there. But the ones I want to call your attention to in particular are 9236 and 9237. They're 2 new codes that we created. 9236 was created at the request of the Career Technical Education Office. And this was in response to a lot of LEAs who have career exploration programs either at the elementary or the middle school level. And so the only available code for LEAs to use last year was 7000, which is career exploration. But unfortunately, the code of 7000 means to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing that it's a CTE course and therefore requires a CTE credential. So our CTE office asked us to add this elementary or middle school career pathway preparation course for those elementary and middle school career exploration courses that also integrate academic content. But what you should know is even though this does not require a CTE credential, it does require a general education credential along with a local assignment option. So just be aware of that. 9237 is a supervised suspension classroom. So a supervised suspension classroom and a teacher that is assigned to that classroom is technically in an alternative setting and qualifies for flexibility under Education 44865, which gives a teacher the flexibility in an alternative setting to teach that course with a credential based on a bachelor's degree and student teaching. So make sure if you have teachers that are assigned to suspension classrooms, rather than using a self-contained code of 1000, you should now select this new code of 9237. Okay, next slide. We also modified the definition of code 9502, which is CTE work experience education. Apparently, a lot of the credential analysts at your counties were confused by this code because, and also the Commission on Teacher Credentialing is actually the one that asked for the clarification in this definition. So the work experience education curriculum, including this particular CTE work experience education course, is in statute, and in statute it specifically says that teachers are not required to have a CTE credential in order to teach this CTE work experience education course. Okay, so we just added clarification to the definition that says it does not require a CTE credential, which is why it's outside of the 7,000 through 8,999 range. Next slide. So we did make some changes to the post-secondary status file. So as you know, as part of Fall 2, you guys have to submit the PSTS or post-secondary status file. And in that file, what you are submitting is post-secondary follow-up information on CTE completers that exited secondary education in the prior academic year. So in this case, we're talking about CTE completers that exited in the 2019-20 academic year. So last year was our very first year of collecting this file. And in addition to the post-secondary status file, there was additional information that the program office needed for the Strong Workforce Program and the CTE incentive grant. And so therefore, a lot of you had to fill out a separate SNAP survey that was done to collect that additional information. So we did modify the PSTS file this year to incorporate those elements of the survey to streamline the data collection, so you will not have to report it in 2 places for this year. Okay, next slide. So here were the changes that were made. So first of all, we added some additional fields. We added fields 7.13, 17, 13, 14, and 15. Again, these only pertain to students who are CTE completers. As you know, the file format changed in its entirety, but we also collected an end of year 4 for students with disabilities. 17, 13, 14, and 15 are not required for students with disabilities in end of year 4. They are required for CTE completers for the purposes of the Fall 2 data collection. Also, with respect to the post-secondary status codes, we did add some new codes to capture information, again, for strong workforce and CTE incentive grant. So those are state apprenticeship, other job training, Peace Corps, and AmeriCorps. Okay, moving on. Oops. Okay, so we put out a flash 191 that gave some guidance on what we were planning to do to reduce the use of the generic seed of all nines. Okay, so we know that generally you guys use seeds of all nines in the course section record for one of 4 reasons. Number one, college teachers. There's college teachers, college professors that are providing dual enrollment instruction, or the students voluntarily taking a course at the community college on the weekends, and those individuals do not have seeds. They are not required to hold K-12 credentials, okay? So you're using nines in the course section record for those individuals. Also, there are, or were, prior to this current academic year, charter school teachers who were not required to be appropriately credentialed because they were teaching what was known as statute as non-core, non-college prep courses. Okay, so we know that you are using nines for those individuals. We know you are using nines for ROCP teachers that were providing instruction to students at the districts that ROCP, that Regional Occupational Center program, served. Okay, so you've got a lot of ROCP teachers, and it's not that they don't have seeds or they're not certificated, it's just that your human resources system in your district doesn't actually own those teachers, and therefore you don't have the staff demographic or staff assignment information for those individuals. So you were just putting a 9 in there because you don't have the other information needed if you actually populated their actual seed. And then the final category is contracted teachers, and contracted teachers meaning itinerant teachers from the County Office of Education or from another district, and it's for that same reason. You were using those nines because you don't have their demographic or assignment information to submit to CalPERS, okay? So we recognize that there's all those scenarios, and those are the reasons that you guys are using nines. But what happens is the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, all these nines are creating lots of exceptions in the CalSAS system. And so your credential analysts are having to go through and justify all these. So we were trying to reduce those. So go ahead and next slide. Okay, so initially our proposal was that Flash 191 said, you're only gonna be able to use nines for college teachers. And then I started getting messages in my inbox saying, are you crazy? So as a result, we've decided to relax that error. It will not be a fatal, but it will be a warning. Okay, just keep in mind that eventually we've got to get to a solution that will allow you to report the seat of the teacher if they actually have one. The other really important thing about charter school teachers is that as of July 1st, they are required to get a certificate of clearance through the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. As part of that process, they are assigned a seat. So if you have charter school teachers that are non-certificated, even if they're non-certificated, you must obtain a seat for them by obtaining a certificate of clearance through the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. Once that's done, you can report a seed for that teacher along with their demographic record and staff assignment record. Okay, so again, we're changing this to a warning if you are using a seed of all nines. Next slide. So, is this me or Paula?
I think it's me.
Okay.
But on the prior slide, I wanted to just emphasize something, which is that the Commission on Teacher Credentialing is going to count any of your generic seats, except for those for dual enrollment courses, as vacancies. So this year, you'll be seeing a lot of vacancies probably in CalSAS, and generally vacancies don't look good. So,
But Paula, they only count them as vacancies if they're not justified by the monitoring authority.
We'll have to just clarify that with them. Yeah. Okay, so going to the next one. So this year will be a consequential year for assignment monitoring. So following the close of the end of the amendment window for Fall 2, we'll be submitting the data over to CalSAS. Hopefully by the middle of sometime in April, CalSAS will open up and you'll start seeing those potential misassignments. You'll have 60 days to complete your review, and then the monitoring authorities have another 30 days to confirm all of those. So basically it'll hold to the traditional kind of calendar. This year it was all a little bit late because it took us a little while to get the Fall 2 data over to CTC, which means that right now, if you go to the next slide, just to give you an update on what's happening right now with the 1920 assignment monitoring, as you may or may not know, that's happening right now. Folks in your LEAs are looking at the potential misassignments or the exceptions in CalSAS. You, as CalPADS folks, might be getting emails or phone calls regarding some of that data. So this is a non-consequential year. CTC will not be posting this data. However, you will be able to see it at the county, district, and school level through your reports generated through CalSAS. The department, we will have to use the data for federal reporting. So the data will be used for federal reporting, but it won't be publicly posted. The next slide. So these, your 1920 data has been loaded into CalSAS, and your LEAs are looking at those right now. As I just said a minute ago, your CalSAS users might be reaching out to you to determine whether or not any of the potential misassignments are that way because of a data problem, in which case they will say, they will quote unquote justify the misassignment by saying it's a CalPADS error. We strongly urge you to ask your CalSAS users for a report in CalSAS, which basically provides a list of all the exceptions identified as a CalPADS error. That might help you mitigate any issues for this coming year, 2021, as you do your Fall 2 reporting. If there's some error that some data, some field that you forgot to populate or something like that, it might just point you to how to make sure your data is cleaner this year so your CalSAS reports end up being cleaner. And we'll provide more clarity on the vacancy issue. We've been going back a little bit with CTC on that, but right now they do view those as vacancies, and we'll have to, we haven't yet confirmed exactly how they're going to report that data back to us or publicly. So right now, if you do have questions, you're to direct your questions to your monitoring authority, which is generally your County Office of Education. If you're a charter school, regardless if you're direct funded or locally funded or report data directly to CalPADS, you should address your questions to your authorizing LEA. And districts, both those that are monitoring authorities and those who are not, should address any of their CalSAS questions to their county office or their monitoring authority. And the COEs can direct questions then to CTC. CTC has a pretty small staff, so they're really asking folks to kind of respect this way of asking questions up through your COE. Ready? questions about?
No, I think we have a couple of questions on these new codes here. There was one in particular, Brandy, on the 9237 from Erin.
She's asking about removal to alternative.
Yes, I think it was important to clarify that.
Yes. Okay. CalPADS administrators, you cannot derive whether or not a student has been removed to an interim alternative setting. Remember that students removed to an interim alternative setting are students with disabilities who have been, not by the IEP team, but they've been unilaterally moved to an alternative setting because they are at risk of harming themselves or others, and it's for specific offenses. So this is not something that you as a CalPADS administrator can figure out. The 45-day placements are something that your special education data coordinator could determine whether or not that was actually made. Okay, so just moving them to a suspension classroom is not necessarily a removal to an interim alternative setting. You need to work with your special education staff to make sure that you're populating that correctly, okay? It's the terminology that they use on the SPED side is generally a 45-day placement, and it's a temporary placement because the student is at risk of harming themselves or others. And it is not a placement made by the IEP team, just by the way.
Okay. That was just one I thought we had to clarify. I don't know, do you see any others, Brandy, you want to speak to?
Let's see.
In regards to what you just covered.
Yeah, I'm trying to look, there were a couple of questions that, so again, if you don't have seeds for these individuals, we're allowing you to submit 9s. Someone else asked about, you know, whether or not you have to obtain seeds for all of your substitute teachers. So if there is a substitute in the classroom on information day and they're a long-term sub, there is no teacher of record in that position, you should report the seat of the substitute, and CTC will actually, if they actually have a seed, then they'll be counted as a vacancy because there is no official teacher of record and the individual in that assignment is on a sub permit. Now, if they're classified employees, you would have to use 9s. The result is the same. A vacancy, meaning there is no teacher of record, will count as a misassignment. Says this, do charter schools have access to the CalSAS system? And the answer is, what is the answer? Paula, did we get an answer from CTC on this?
Yeah, I mean, your monitoring authority, the County Office of Education, they're the ones that are providing access.
But only if you're, for charters, it's their monitoring, their chartering authority.
Authorizing LEA.
So it's
then I think it's up to the COE and the LEA, who's the chartering authority, to determine who has access. It's up to the LEA then as to whether or not they provide the access.
So apparently they can give you access, but
I believe so, yeah. I don't think that the CTC is, you know, it's kind of like how we do CalPADS, right? We give the administrators access and then they are able to provide access. But I'll get more clarity from CTC exactly how that
Do you
works.
know the actual name of the report in CalSAS that would show the CalPADS error data?
I don't know the exact name. We can also find that out. But they apparently were trained on it. There's a, we can ask another link we can provide is their slide deck on their training on CalPADS.
This is a very good time to, most of you may have gotten the listserv message yesterday, but we are reconvening our office hours for assignment monitoring, which will include our CTC staff. So you can ask all of these questions directly to CTC staff starting Monday. So put it on your calendar, bookmark it. It's Mondays at 2 p.m. from 2 to 3 p.m. It's just basically a Q&A It's updates on the current assignment monitoring process and then potential changes they will be making for the 2021 assignment monitoring process.
Thank you, Brandy. And with that, we'll just move on, right? Any
Yes.
questions not answered here can be answered on the Monday Q&A.
Okay.
Work-based learning.
Yeah, so the new work-based learning collection. So we did have a flash on this, which was pretty comprehensive, flash 184. So I would direct folks there. But as you know, this coming end of year, there'll be a new work-based learning collection that will be part of end of year 1. Next slide. But what LEA should be doing right now is reviewing that file, because it probably will result in some changes to your local business processes or creating new ones, especially around 3 of the work type learning types that are included now in this file. So, and again, all of this may be kind of weird this year because of COVID. But you should be reviewing your current business processes for how you're creating, administering, supervising, and evaluating your internships, and adjusting those processes to capture the data that you'll need to submit for student internships. There's going to be a requirement of submitting data on evaluation by the employers of your internship, so you should be making sure that that's captured by your employers of your interns, establishing processes to collect the number of hours that students spend outside of the school at the internship, or the student-led enterprise, or in the virtual simulated work-based learning. And finally, identifying or creating courses that include the content that's required for the student-led enterprises and virtual simulated work-based learning. So for both of those types, the enterprise or the virtual simulated work-based learning, it doesn't have to be a specific course. It could be any course that contains the elements for those work-based learning types. So those are things to be doing now. The data then will be collected on this new file that we provided, and you can look at in Flash 184. The data will then be reported not through, some of these indicators were previously reported through the SCNR and through the SPED file. All of those indicators have already been removed from the SCNR and SPED files, and they are now on this new work-based learning file as not as indicators, but as codes in the work-based learning type code field. So LEA should be tracking student completion of these different work-based learning types, including those specific to students with disabilities. So here, you know, at first, the 2 of the work-based learning indicators were collected on the SPED file. Implicit in that was that the data was being maintained in the SPED systems. Regardless of where the data is being maintained, it's going to be reported up through the student information system. So if you previously maintained that data in your SPED file, then you'll need business processes for populating the student information system. Or if they were maintained in the student information system, then you're all good. So these are the new work-based learning types. So this just summarizes the new ones. As I said before, the internship, the student-led enterprise, and the virtual simulated work-based learning are the new types, all of which require additional data. So that's what you should be reviewing. The rest of the work-based indicators were collected either on the SCNR or on the SPED. However, one of them, which was previously the state or federal job program, has been pulled apart into 5 separate specific programs. The program staff realized that they actually needed that that particular detail. So rather than just one state or federal program, you need to collect them on those specific types. And then we will also just remind you that the definitions for the transition work-based experience and transition work-based work exploration for students with disabilities, the names and the definitions have been broadened. So you should review those names and definitions, and you probably need to build in a process locally for determining whether or not students have met those two work-based learning types. Okay, now this is just a reminder about reporting chronic absenteeism. Again, there were no changes to the student absence summary or the STAS file to accommodate any of the modified instructional models that are occurring due to COVID. But we did provide guidance for how to populate the STAS file. So you should refer to that flash and that guidance. This is just another reminder that last year you all submitted restraint and seclusion data through the different files. But upon an analysis of the data that was submitted, it's very clear that many LEAs didn't submit this data or submitted very little of it. So there is a little bit of concern because we are required by law to publicly post that data within 3 months of the close of our collection. So we'll give you a heads up when that occurs. It might cause a little bit of kabubble because there's not a lot of data that's been reported by a lot of LEAs. So this is just a reminder that LEAs are required to submit restraint and seclusion data for all students, both general ed and students with disabilities, and you're supposed to submit it for your students attending your non-public schools. So again, just a reminder that this is data that needs to be reported. And of course, this year with COVID, that might make the data look, odd for this year, but for just again, a reminder. And again, reminder to report your homeless data and update that data. With all the fires, we know that there's, probably an increase, unfortunately, in homeless students. A few years ago, we did send out a flash following one of the big fires, Flash 131. So that might be a useful flash to refer back to when you're, dealing with trying to update your homeless data. Okay, and finally, just planning for your 2021-22 assessments. Student test settings are going to be coming in through CalPADS. And that's going to begin July 1st of 2021. So instead of setting your student test settings to the Test Operations Management System or TOMS, those data will be coming into CalPADS, and CalPADS will be providing the test settings to TOMS. So this is going to be test settings for all the statewide assessments for both CASP and the LPAC. And the designated supports are available. Okay, so then what you're going to be submitting through this test setting file are both designated supports and accommodations. Okay, next file, or next slide. And you're going to be able to submit these from both your student information system as well as your special ed system. The data coming from your special ed systems need to go through the API. And anytime data is coming for an individual student from both systems, the special ed system data will always trump that coming from the student information system. Some of the other functionality will be that the file is going to be a full replacement file, and it can be uploaded on an ongoing basis. You will have ability to upload data for individual students through the CalPADS user interface. And there will also be an extract available for you to download, so you can see exactly what test settings are in CalPADS. So we are going to have a user acceptance testing period for this new file because it is really important for this all to work once testing opens up for the initial LPAC on July 1st. The final documentation will be published by the end of this month. We've already shared it with their SEDS and SIS vendors, so they've already seen it. We're going to have a user acceptance testing period, basically in the March to April timeframe, but CSIS will be soliciting participants for UATs in January, with the UAT commencing in mid-March. Then we're going to have a period which is a little bit different, as we're opening up the functionality to all the LEAs and vendors in mid-April. So you'll have time to kind of make sure it's all working for you in the mid-April to mid-May timeframe. We'll shut it all down and then reopen for production on July 1st. So just a heads up, if you're interested at all in participating in the UAT, CSIS will be soliciting folks. Martha, did you have anything you wanted to add for that?
Just that, you know, if you are thinking about it and you'd like to participate, you could send in a service ticket, and you know, we'd like to know those that are interested. But just keep in mind that this testing is going to happen mid-March through mid-April, and so you have to be able to multitask and not only do your ongoing work in CalPads, but then have time to do this extra work of the testing. And so it's not suited for everybody. So if you're interested, just keep that in mind.
So we have a few people asking sort of the same questions. So they're asking where test settings, what the recommendation is for test settings for students with disabilities who are also English learners and who also may be on 504 plans. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to talk about it?
You go for it.
Okay. So our recommendation is that all test settings, so we started talking about this probably about 6 months ago with our assessment office, and also in the LPAC webinar that we did, we talked about the fact that you guys have got to start doing some coordination in terms of where to house test settings for all your different groups of students. So ideally what should happen is if a student is a student with disabilities, and that student also happens to be an English learner, then those test settings should be housed in the special education data system in their entirety. Okay, so your EL coordinators are going to need to work with your case managers to make sure that the students' test settings are in the special education data systems, because we're recommending that all test settings for students with disabilities be housed in the special education data system. Now, if a student is also on a 504 plan, we do know that they keep those test settings in the student information system. Some of you are asking, how is that going to work if the SIS is sending up one set of settings for the 504 and then the SPED system is sending up a different set of accommodations? Well, keep in mind that within the file, if you look at the file specifications once it gets posted, you have to specify the participation type, which is this a special education student or student with disabilities? Is this a student on a 504? Or is this a general education student? So based on that type of student participation, CalPads will validate those things. And if the test settings for the 504 and the test settings for their IEP are discrepant, or there's a compatibility issue with those test settings, whatever is in the special education system in their IEP will overwrite what is in their 504. So for example, the IEP says color contrast red. The 504 says color contrast green. Color contrast red will overwrite that because that is what's in the student's IEP. So there has to be an effort to coordinate all of these test settings. Now, for students who are not students with disabilities, those test settings, if they're general education students, English learners who are not students with disabilities, and students on 504 accommodation plans who are not on IEPs, those will all be housed in the student information systems.
So if you go to, Martha, the last slide, it just touches on this a little bit. We have not sent a flash out on this yet, so we will definitely be doing that with some of the detail that Brandy just talked about. But I think one thing that the reason partly we're having a lot of testing is because even though you have been submitting test settings to TOMS, there haven't really been validations there. In CalPADS, there will be validations, so you'll have to get used to those validations. So Brandy, did you want to add anything to that?
About the validations?
Well, just the fact that they're gonna be validations in CalPADS, whereas
Yeah.
previously in setting those to TOMS, there were not. So that's going to be a difference.
Yeah, there is going to be a difference. So just keep in mind that the values that you're actually putting into the template that you upload to TOMS right now, those aren't going to change significantly, but there's not a whole lot of validation that occurs on those test settings when you're uploading them directly to TOMS. When they come through CalPADS, we will be doing an extra set of validation. So primarily, it's looking at we're looking at the student's grade level. Are you picking test settings that are compatible with a student's grade level? Are you picking test settings that are valid for a student on an active IEP, right? So you can only submit test settings for a student with disabilities if they've been identified as a student with disabilities in CalPADS. So we're doing a lot of those validations on the front end, and we will have reports available for you to actually see what will be sent over to TOMS. They're not certification reports. They're more like operational data store reports that will be refreshed every time you upload those test settings files. So just be prepared for that additional layer of validations. Now keep in mind that what you're not doing is telling us which particular test that test setting is being used for. You won't really find out whether or not a test setting is applicable for a test until that they actually get pushed into TOMS. But we can talk about that at a later time because I'm probably getting too far in the weeds.
So can you speak to why we're doing this? Why can't the data, the settings continue to come from the SEDS? Oh, sorry, my finger went crazy.
Well, the primary reason that we're moving the test settings through CalPADS is because you guys asked for it. You've been asking for the test settings to come through CalPADS because again, what was happening is, well, here's typically what we would hear. An LEA would upload test settings, or they would try to upload test settings to TOMS. And guess what? TOMS says the student is in a special education student. So guess what? You have to go into CalPADS, you have to submit the record that's needed to identify the student as a student with disabilities, and then you can go and upload the test settings. This way, if it comes through CalPADS, you won't even be able to get the test settings into CalPADS unless they're already a SPED student. So the validation happens on the front end instead of when you're getting ready to test the student. Okay, that's the other reason that you have to start planning ahead, that you have to have all of the necessary information in CalPADS prior to testing, a minimum of 2 weeks prior to testing if possible, right? So, but primarily it came as a request from LEAs to sort of streamline the process. So for students with disabilities, everything should come from the special education data system. For those students that are not students with disabilities that have either 504 plans or they're general ed students or they're ELs that need accommodations, those should be stored in the SIS and then transported up. And plus it also sort of streamlines the process of collecting all accommodations and designated supports for all tests, okay? So right now, you've got to upload 2 different files for the LPAC and for the Smarter Balance test. Now you don't have to do that, right? It's all coming from CalPADS. It's all going to be put in one file and then gets delivered to the respective test.
And Brandy, is it true that, you know, to the extent that the designated supports and accommodations don't change, they don't have to keep uploading it? It's there already. So it's going to be a big push initially probably, but after that, it's what's changed.
Right.
And even though it's a full replacement file, you know, to the extent that it's onesie twosies. You can just update through the online maintenance.
Right. So, and yes, students can be on 504 accommodation plans and IEPs at the same time. It has been known to happen. Remember, 504 accommodation plans are temporary disabilities. So let's say a student with autism breaks their leg and they need additional accommodations. That's usually accommodated through a 504 accommodation plan. So just remember that for this year, 2021, everything is status quo. You still have to upload your test settings directly to TOMS beginning in 21-22. That's when the test settings will flow through CalPADS. And just to be clear, when it does come from, when we are collecting the test settings through CalPADS, your SPED vendors will be sending those files through the API, just like you do every other CalPADS file. Okay, so SACE, Cyrus, Welligent, Faucet, WebIEP, PowerSchool, they will be sending those files, the test settings files, directly through the API to CalPADS.
And when we make these changes on the work-based learning or the language coordinators, whoever's in charge of the particular area, are they being informed? Because they feel like just the data coordinator is informed and not the rest of the folks in the organization.
Right.
So we're communicating with the necessary people. That's a question. Are we?
I'm sorry, what did you say? What was the question?
We're informing the data coordinators about these changes. Is there a plan to inform other responsible parties in the organization, the language coordinators, whoever does the CTE coordinators on the work-based learning? Are they going to be made aware of the changes?
Yeah, I think we're working with our assessments office to make sure that communication starts on this as soon as possible.
So again, the feature for test settings, we're going to be in a testing mode come March, but as of July 1, 2021, that's when it goes live. Anything else we see question-wise that we need to answer? A lot of thank yous. Yes, this spring you still need to upload to TOMS. It's not until the 2021 school year, July 1. Okay, I think that's ready now, Angela. Can't hear you.
Sure am, Martha.
There you go.
All right, so hang in there, folks. We're getting near the end. I just have a few slides to go through with you on suggested milestones and a quick checklist, as well as some tips on dealing with support. Before we do that, though, we are going to have some interaction from you. We have a question for you, 3 questions, in fact. And so Martha's going to pull up a poll, and we would like you to answer these 3 questions before we move on.
So you should be seeing the poll.
I do, but I'm a host, so I'm a co-host.
And I'll give you a couple of minutes, folks. Yeah, it looks like people are seeing it and we're getting answers. It's just 3 questions. Wow. Staying steady with about even. Yeah. You know, and we have, you know, several hundred people on here. Be nice to see several hundred answers in either of those. Okay, it's kind of holding steady. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm closing it. There you go, Angela.
Can we share the results?
I am sharing.
Okay. So how do we do here?
Are you asking me?
I'm reading. Yeah, that Lone Ranger is lower than I thought. So I'm really glad to see that people are starting to get more people engaged and recognizing that this is a bigger project than one person.
And those Lone Rangers, you know, if you're struggling and you need somebody to talk it through and some strategies, you know, you can send in a service ticket and we'll try to help you out so you aren't so alone.
Yeah, well, that's why we wanted to do this poll, though. I was going to share something for you and the people who are still in the improving phase of building out their data team. So you can go ahead and stop sharing those, Martha. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Okay, do you see the
Yep.
CSIS website? So I am at csis.fcmat.org. And why I brought you here, if you go to the search function here and type in the term RACI, R-A-C-I, we have a tool that we developed last fall for the CASEMAS to CalPADS transition, not to be confused with the Cradle to Career project that's going on statewide. And it's still valid for this year. It's just a template that can be used for any kind of project management. And so we would recommend, if you are still in the improving phase of building out your data team, or you're the Lone Ranger, that this is a really great document to get you started on writing stuff down about who's responsible, who's involved, right? The very first tab is like, who are the critical players involved? If you've never used a RACI, there's some definitions and then tips on how to use this document. But the real meat of this document is the actual RACI chart itself. And you develop your list by listing out all the tasks that are involved with a given project. And then on the right-hand side, you have the people who are involved. And then you determine if, so for each task, there should be at least one person that is responsible. There's at least one person that's accountable. There's often several people that are consulted and some people that are just informed. It helps you just even writing these down, identifying the scope of all the work that needs to be done. Who are the data experts out there? Who are the data stewards that know your data best, and making sure they're involved. And thinking about this right now, I right at the tail end of year submission, I was working with a rather large LEA that was rather disorganized, and it was a lot of finger pointing about who was supposed to be doing what. And I had to get the superintendent involved. They were really at risk of missing the deadline. And had they written this down ahead of time and who was responsible, they could have avoided all that. Instead, they made a lot of assumptions about what work needed to be done and who was going to do it. And there we were a week before the deadline, and they are pulling all-nighters to get the data in. And sure enough, they're asking, can we decertify end of year? We have some corrections we'd like to make, and we don't want you in that position. So this is just a tool for you, for those of you that are in that position. Were you able to see that document when I had it up?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, good. Before
So
I
just
leave, oh, go ahead.
Repeat that address again, how to get there.
csis.fcmat.org. And I got there by using the search function and typing in RACI. But while we're here, there's some questions that came up in the chat. And so on our resources page is the PowerPoint for today's presentation. So if you're having trouble downloading it from the chat box, or you forgot where it was, go to the csis.fcmat.org, and it is the very first link listed there. And also, while we were on this page, if you were to click on CalPADS, actually, is it support? Support, sorry. This bottom quadrant here is the CalPADS Q&A, and it's a great resource. I think we're up to about 90 people attending. It's a weekly live interaction with CDE and CSIS folks and LEAs. So if you come here on Wednesday at 3 o'clock, just click on that link and you'll join our Zoom meeting. And it's great. Brandy's there, Joe from the SPED team at CDE is there, lots of CSIS folks. And so we typically get a lot of really good questions and a lot of great interaction on that.
You don't have to have a question to join us.
True. A lot of people just join in to listen because we always say we learn something even, you know, on those calls. And so it's a great learning opportunity. It's not a training. It's really basically an open forum, but they are
Informative.
very informative. Yeah. Kind of entertaining sometimes too. Brandy keeps threatening to sing. So, you know, maybe you'll crash that one.
It's actually completely appropriate right now.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was to help you get ready for Fall 1. This is a really good time of year to audit your users. I'm speaking specifically to the CalPADS LEA administrators right now, that if you've had staff that have left or new people that have joined, this is a good time to review who has access to CalPADS. It's not so simple. There's not a little report you can run. I think we have a backlog request to add that. But for now, I just wanted to quickly show you, if you came into admin user management and then clicked on the users and roles tab.
And only the admin can do this function,
Only the
right?
LEA admin can do this, yeah. I don't know why I'm not clicking on that. It's thinking. There we go. So you would select all schools and all users. And if you were to leave the default, all of the roles are selected. And so people that have multiple roles will show up on the list multiple times. And so a trick for that is, it's pretty safe to assume almost everybody in your LEA has the student search function role. And so I recommend selecting that. And then you can hit the search button and you'll get a list below. You can copy and paste it into Excel if that's easier. If you want to send it to your HR person and say, hey, flag people who are no longer employed with us and give it back to me and I'll revoke their account. Or you maybe need to send it to different departments to say, hey, let me know if you have new staff that need an account and I'll add them for you.
While you're there, how do you deactivate a user, Angela? Just real quick.
How do you deactivate a user?
Yeah, remove all their roles. If they have no roles, they can't get in.
I was getting an error doing this earlier, so I'm going to blame you if that happens again, okay?
Okay. Gerald will just have to come and ask for reinstatement.
Yeah, I think it's going to time out. It's going to say,
okay.
Oops, something went wrong.
But it's a matter of selecting the user, removing all of their roles, and then
yeah,
saving it.
I get what you're saying. Okay, so yeah, you can't delete people out of CalPADS, so they'll always have a user ID, but what you do is remove all the roles and the org associated with them, and they won't be able to log into your organization any longer. That's where you were headed with that, Martha, right?
Yes.
And then I wasn't planning on doing self-help, but just based on the questions we were getting, I do want to point out, it'll be reminders for everybody, in the footer of CalPADS, so no matter what page you're on in CalPADS, if you scroll all the way down, this error list is the updated for each release that we have. So we had a release that went in this morning. So if you were to download this right now, it's 12.12. It takes CDE a little bit longer to get it up. So this is always going to be the most recent copy. And then people on this call today were asking about known issues, and I thought we had trained you all. Always come here to the known issues. This is updated every day, usually between 10 and 12 in the morning. If you encounter a problem that doesn't seem like it's your data seems fine, come here and see if we have a bug written up on it. That way you don't need to submit a ticket. And so I think we have one on SPED 433, no, 425. There we go. So if you have a 425 and you read the description and it matches what you're seeing, you don't necessarily need to put it a ticket. It's something we're aware of and we're going to work on it. So that helps us. We've kind of doubled our clientele, more than doubled, with adding case miss. The SPED people have been contacting us, plus the SELPA coordinators, and we haven't added any additional staff. In fact, we lost somebody. So the more self-help you can do, the better. We like to give you lots of attention, but there's a lot of you, and so the more self-reliant you are, the better we'll be able to support you. And then the last thing I wanted to show you in CalPads, there we are, there's my error. Again, I'm in test, so don't worry, you're not getting that in production. I noticed a lot of the questions you were asking today can be answered in the user manual. So under help in the left-hand navigation bar of CalPads is the user manual, and I typically use the search function. So somebody was asking about roles, user roles, or in one of the chat boxes. So this page lists every role that's available in CalPads and what it does. So you can see SENR Edit is a powerful role. It has a lot of things you can do once you have that. The other thing that's in the user manual that's super, super helpful, and I think with the strange rules we're having on 1.17 this year, are the mapping guides. And so that's we call them the report mapping guides. So 1.17 has not been updated yet. We're almost done with it. It should go out this week, probably before Friday is my guess. So this is last year's rules, but so Paula had that nice table, right, that listed, okay, the DC is through January, NSLP through December 23rd, EL is through November 13th. It's going to be hard to keep that all straight in your head, and you don't have to necessarily memorize all that. You could come here to the user manual, pull up the report mapping guide, and we list out all the rules and how each individual cell is populated on each report. I think I'm done with the live part, Martha. We can go through my last few slides.
Okay. There you go.
Don't see you yet.
Oh, I have to share again. That's why.
Looks good on your screen, huh?
It does. How's that?
Okay, so you saw this when you went to training, right? These are just suggested milestones to keep your team on track, so that you are able to make that deadline in December, factoring in your SELPA approval, giving them time to look at your data. And the next slide is just Fall 2. You'll see that in your training when Fall 2 comes around. And somebody asked earlier in the presentation, when does Fall 2 start processing? And the answer is January 5th. But doesn't mean you can't upload data now. You can certainly submit data. You just won't have any snapshot reports until January 5th. Okay, and the next 2 slides is a really super high-level checklist of getting what you need to be done, what you need to get done for Fall 1 in order to meet the deadline, and just another quick tool to help keep you on track. I'm not going to go through all those, Martha. They can print it out and keep it, and welcome to do with it what you want in terms of moving stuff around and adding to it, or use this as a jumping off point to populate your RACI chart. Okay, and again, this is another slide from training, but just helped reinforce when I read that list of all those reports, I think, wow, there's no way one or two people is going to be knowledgeable on all of that content. And so keep that in mind, that your data stewards are critical in evaluating these reports, and so we want to build in time to let them review these reports, factoring in that we have a holiday before the Fall 1 deadline, so keep that in mind. Also, we recommend some kind of a handoff or exchange of these reports. So, for example, you could print them out and have somebody sign it, or you could email it to them and say, please reply back by this date, acknowledging that you approve of these, and if you don't reply, it's assumed that you approve of these numbers, and we're going to certify this data. Okay, my usual spiel about getting in touch with us. Do look at the known issues. I showed you how to get to that. our preference is for the LEA admin or the SPED coordinator. We understand that there's, there's times where it's more appropriate for the SPED coordinator to contact us, or the SELPA admin, but don't have like your language coordinator contact us. They should, if they have a CalPADS question, they should go to the LEA admin. And our preference to getting a hold of us is through email or the web form. We typically only check the phone voicemail once a day, so please use the email or web, and it logs a ticket directly for us. And also just make sure you're including information that we're going to be able to use to help you. If you just say, I have an error, that, then we're going to have to go back and forth and figure it out. Include the job ID, the error number. It's okay to include an SSID or a SEED. That's not personally identifiable. But think of it from, if our perspective, if you're sending us a question, how are we going to be able to help you? Do we have enough information? And ask yourself that before you send it on up to us. And just a reminder, don't attach any student data or staff data that's personally identifiable.
All we need is the number, and then we can see the rest.
Okay, and so those are some of the resources I went over. I didn't talk about Bridge, but if you are an admin or SELPA coordinator, you have a Bridge account, which is our learning management system. Oh, you know what I didn't show you? I'll come back. I wanted to talk about YouTube real quick. And then there's the CalPADS system documentation, and we went over the CSIS website. And before, are we done?
Close to it.
Close to it. So this is all the ways to get a hold of us, but you guys already know that. I'm going to share. I did want to share, so if you were just Googled CalPADS training or CalPADS YouTube, this is our CSIS training channel. Recommend that you subscribe, but the trainers have been doing a really good job organizing it lately. And so I like what they've done, and I wanted to point it out to you that, so the Q&As that I talked about, usually we have the last 2 weeks up there. You get a bonus one this week. So it starts with intro, CalPADS error correction, fall one, end of year, it goes on and on. The popular one lately has been the certification errors and the validation errors, and Nate's been doing a great job of stepping it through the error. It's real quick. You can see the view the playlist. They're usually like under 5 minutes. And so if you get stuck and the error list isn't helping you, come here and take a look and see if Nate can walk you through, and maybe a light bulb will come on. The other thing that I use on this page, if I don't feel like scrolling around, is just the search function. And so CERT 004 is a really popular valid or certification error. And so let's see, do we have a video? Sure enough, we have a video on how to resolve CERT 4 errors. Anything else you want to see on this page, Martha?
But we'll probably be adding to it. We really had some extra bandwidth to focus on the end of year certifications. We were way too busy last fall to do recordings on that. So we'll probably be working on some of the fall certification errors. I don't think they're all up there, but we'll be working on the ones that are most common.
Okay, I'm gonna stop share, and you'll have to reshare your screen. So do we have questions?
So Brandy, are there any questions that you need to cover?
Lots of questions about where to get this slide. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one. Is it appropriate for the SEDS coordinator to have a Bridge account? If yes, how do I get one?
That would be applying for that, Angela, and that was on our website.
The SEDS coordinator?
Yeah, well, this is why I wanted to ask this question.
For anybody that, so.
SELPAs get the Bridge.
Yeah, SELPA, not SEDS, right?
Yeah, you're right. However, if the LEA admin, because we allow 2 accounts for the LEA, if one of the LEA admins wants to have a SED coordinator have access to Bridge, that can be accomplished, but you have to do the application. But I would say we put all of our recordings on YouTube. So, keep that in mind. You're not ultimately missing a whole lot by not being in Bridge. It's just a little bit of a delay before we get the latest recording published on YouTube. So it's not the end of the world is what I'm saying. But you can ask your LEA admin, negotiate.
Will there be additional trainings?
We are done with our Fall 1 training. There'll be recordings of what we trained on. There's the Q&As to attend if there's specific questions, and then we'll have specific recordings on resolving certain errors. I believe our anomaly training is the last training that we have to do, and that's not really specific to Fall 1, but it is a functionality in CalPads that LEA admins need to be comfortable with to reduce your anomaly rate.
Hey, Brandy, I
Yeah.
think we forgot to mention the fact that you guys are planning a work-based learning file training or a webinar in November, I think.
Yes, mid-November.
Yeah, so mid-November. Did we say before or after Thanksgiving break? I can't remember.
I think before
Okay.
mid-November.
Because we've got all of these new data elements that are being collected for the work-based learning file. Even though you're not actually submitting the file right now, what's really important is that your CTE coordinators understand what needs to be collected, and more importantly, where it is in your student information system, because most of your SIS vendors have implemented these data elements in the SIS, but your teachers, your CTE teachers, your CTE coordinators have to start tracking that information now so that it will report and extract in end of year 1 for the new work-based learning file. So we're going to be working with our CTE office along with CSIS to put together a training before Thanksgiving break specifically for your CTE coordinators along with the CalPads administrators so that they understand the data requirements for the work-based learning. Are any SPED specific trainings planned? We don't currently have any, but if there is a need, then please submit a ticket and we can see how we can accommodate you.
Yeah, and help us better understand what areas of the system, because like I said, we do have recordings on the basics of CalPads and specifically on certification process. And so if there's certain areas that you're not quite understanding, take a look at our recordings and then let us know, what we're missing.
So we have a new SPED data management person this year. Where should I direct them to get training resources on how to do Fall 1 SPED components? We use SACE if that's relevant.
So we do have a data population recording for students with disability. So maybe they need to start with the basic on CalPads and then jump to the students with disability data population, all on the YouTube channel.
And SACE actually did a CalPads data population training as well. So you might want to check with SACE because I know that they had a instructional video. They have a few, I think. Any specific questions, you can obviously just reach out through the service desk ticket. I had a few questions about CERT 19 and about whether or not it's triggering incorrectly.
They should check the known issues.
Yeah, I know, but it doesn't really say, there is a known issues.
What is 19? What does 19 do?
Dropouts.
They're reporting dropouts but they didn't have any 9-12 enrollment last year.
So it's bug 4550, and it's fatal CERT 19 errors triggering incorrectly.
Sorry.
And then there's another one for a more recent one, 5515, invalid fatal CERT 19 is triggering for all high schools. So that one we found last week, and so should be fixed within the next couple of weeks. So ignore those errors for now.
Okay. Will the ISAAPP tool eventually integrate with CalPads or SIS systems since there have been so many recent improvements to the tool this year?
What is ISA?
Right, so
the Tom's tool, right?
yeah, so actually we were gonna meet on that to understand better exactly what they're doing with that this year.
Okay.
Because I think they're gonna do something to help facilitate things, but we needed to understand better.
Okay. I don't see.
Why are snapshot reports not available earlier, especially for validation of seedbed counts? Seedbeds information day, it's a point in time, but we give LEAs time after seedbeds to gather up their data and get it all in and cleaned up and check the counts. You can update and send up your files ahead of time of Census Day and then get through all of your validations and have your data really clean. But we typically don't run snapshots, 365 days of the year. We're getting close, but not quite. At the time that we start a new school year, we have to implement the changes for that new school year. And unfortunately, with all of the work that we're doing, we can't keep up sometimes. And so we do need the month of September to get the system ready for the new rules for the given year. And so snapshots really can't start running until we have all of those business rules in place, which our target tends to be the start of or when Census Day hits. That's when we want to start running the business rules, because it's students enrolled as of that point in time. So hopefully that explanation helps a little bit. And that's why we try to give you the ODS report so that you can look at the data, approximate is, we're trying to get them, some of the ODS reports, the high profile ones, current, but you could use ODS reports in lieu of the snapshot reports. You just won't have the certification validations until we do run snapshots. I hope that gave you time, Brandy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, there aren't any additional pressing questions that I'm seeing. Let's see. Here's one. We have a district approved teacher in one of our schools that's a charter school who is a specialist. Can she also still get a seed? So Chris, this person probably already has a seed. And so what I'm hearing is she's an itinerant teacher from the district. So if the charter school wants to report her seed, the charter school will also have to report her staff demographic and staff assignment record. The other option for this year is just to put all nines in the course section record. So where possible, if you have access to the staff demo and staff assignment record, it's probably a good idea to report those as well as the seed for the teacher. But very likely that person already has one. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Cert 132, I'm looking on the error list and I cannot find it. Do we not have it on the error list?
It should be. It's not a new one. So we're in fall 1, so you got to go to the tab for the particular submission that we're in. And make sure you don't have other filters on when you're in the error list. That could be preventing it.
I see it. It's on the fall 1 certification tab.
All right. So I want to verify.
And
Go ahead.
I was going to say, going back to the RACI document that Angela shared, it is a sample. So feel free to adjust it. And if it has 2 columns that are identical, I don't know, just remove one and, or replace it with something else. So do not take it literally. It's, suggestive. It's trying to give you guys some ideas, some prompts so that you can, work on it and build it to your needs locally. Everybody's going to be doing this a little bit differently. So please take it and modify it to your needs.
For sure. I don't think any 2 districts in the state would have an identical RACI, right? Everybody handles things a little bit differently. And so definitely customize that to your needs.
Okay, so we have a question. I want to verify if our students are taking a CTE course via an online curriculum and being taught by their credentialed staff, not our teachers, we can use SEED 9999 this year. So the short answer to your question is yes. okay? But the guidance that I've received from CTC, so this is really important that you guys listen to what I'm about to say. So remember, when you're sending over that seat of all nines, it generates what's called a predetermined exception, okay, in CalSAS. Does it mean that it's automatically a misassignment? No, not necessarily. It's just based on the use of those nines, they're dropping those into a predetermined exception box, which means they count them as vacancies. You can provide justification to those predetermined exceptions, but what you're going to have to do is provide justification that the teacher providing the instruction has the appropriate credential. In this scenario that you just talked about, because the teachers very likely are credentialed outside of California, they would not be appropriately credentialed. So ultimately, this would probably end up as a misassignment. Okay, so for online curriculum, if there is a teacher if it's instructor-led and there's a teacher providing the content, teachers issuing the grades, then that individual is the person that is technically the teacher of record for that course and is required to be appropriately authorized. Okay, so this is a question that's come up a lot about CTE courses. Okay, clarifying question regarding plan type 900. Since an initial IEP meeting is held to determine eligibility, an IEP date is added to the student record along with parent involvement. We are getting 543 errors, trying to determine what fields can have data in them, what fields need to be blank. So Kara, if you look at the error list, so the fields validated include those two fields. So anything that is IEP related, the two fields that you're talking about specifically is that the parental involvement. That has to be blank as well. So what we're looking for essentially in plan type 700, 800, 900 is the referral date, the parental consent date, the meeting date, the plan type, right? So it's a very small set of data that you have to submit for plan types 700, 800, and 900. All of the fields that would generally be populated annually on the IEP document, those need to be blank when the record comes up to CalPADS. Okay, please address the preferred gender in the SIS and how it goes to CalPADS. We're getting fatal errors and do not know how to correct these errors. So Paula, this was a question that came up earlier because ARIES has actually implemented a process where they're actually, if a preferred gender is indicated in ARIES, they're sending the preferred gender up rather than the legal gender. And so coming up in batch, they're getting the error that says that the demographics are different.
Maybe we should bring that up with ARIES.
Yeah, so that's one thing we're going to have to bring up with ARIES, but there is a workaround for it, correct, Angela?
Is it not, we have to change it online?
Right. Yeah, so you can't do it via batch, but you could change gender via online maintenance.
Correct.
Same with the name, but this is about the preferred name, right?
Right. Well, this is about preferred gender because ARIES.
Oh, preferred gender.
And if they've indicated a preferred gender, ARIES is reporting that gender rather than the legal gender.
Yeah.
Let's see. I was told SPED 531 is a known issue. Do you have an ETA for this fix? SPED 531. Does anybody know that one off the top of their head?
No, but oh, here I have it. Invalid reporting LEA and school of attendance combination for the charter LEA. That is one that is in our backlog. So I don't have an ETA, but we know how important that is. Those are the charter LEAs, I think, when they try to give us a MPS school or a private school, Brandy, and we were not having it. And so we need to adjust the 531 to allow for private school and MPS for those charter LEAs. I think that's where the bug is. So for some LEAs, it's legit because you are not, as a charter, you are not giving us your 7-digit charter number in the school. So if in doubt, send in a ticket. You know, if we already indicated that you are, your ticket is associated to the defect, we know it's important because you can't get the record in until we get it fixed. So I can't say though, you know, may still be a couple of weeks before we can get that turned around. We're on a 2-week sprint cycle.
Okay.
And one just went in this morning, folks.
So Sherry Rivera says, what about primary residence for plant type 900? Should that be populated? No. Don't populate primary residence. Okay. And then Regine is asking if there's a, I'm assuming you meant student instead of county. So if there's a student that doesn't show up in CalPADS under SPED, but the student has an IEP and that student enrolls with us, how do we proceed? They don't use SACE. So I'm not sure. Obviously, if the student has an IEP and they don't have any existing SPED records in CalPADS, you need to submit up a transaction for them. And if that's not answering your question specifically, just send in a service ticket.
And you know, you have to know who your data coordinator is, because everything in CalPADS starts with an enrollment, and an enrollment comes out of the SIS. And before you can do an enrollment, you have to have a SSID. So SPED folks, you really have to know who your data coordinator is on the SIS side and really work closely in coordinating those enrollments so that you can add SPED records.
Okay, so if the enrollment date is incorrect in CalPADS enrollment file for my SPED student, I'm allowed to change this date to reflect the true enrollment listed in SACE and validate it from there. I was hoping to clear CERT 144 for a student. Not sure if this is possible because it was reported for the 1920 school year. So are you asking if it's possible for you to correct the enrollment date? So the only place that the enrollment date can be corrected is on the student enrollment record. And that information comes from the student information system. So you need to coordinate with your SIS data coordinator to get any enrollment date corrections made. And yes, you can correct historical data if it's wrong.
So before we continue on with the questions, I do want to say that we are done with our presentation, and I am losing some people. And so I do want to remind you folks that we would really appreciate if you fill out our survey, because it helps us then, you know, work on improvements if we need to. So here is the link to the survey. And we did schedule this till 12:30. Hopefully we won't be on that long, but I don't know, Brandy, are you able to continue and answer questions? People don't have to stay, but please do answer the survey. But if you want to stay, we'll continue to answer a few questions till we're pretty much, you know, at the end.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Thank you.
So SPED 193, SPED 0443, I was told to wait until CalPADS did some upgrades on LEAs that changed CELPAS. Do you have an ETA for this error? So all of those updates were made, but what we found out subsequently, particularly for 0443, is that there's a known issue. There's a defect with the way that is triggering. So the updates were made, but now it's just not triggering correctly. So wasn't that supposed to go in today, you guys? Martha and Angela?
I wasn't paying attention.
SPED 443, the known issue.
I'm looking for it, Brandy.
Thank you.
I'm not finding anything. And I know we had one written on 193 that we ended up closing as not a bug. It was just a matter of those tables getting updated. So we made it a ticket from you.
Okay, and maybe I can forward the additional tickets that I have. So this is, yeah.
Just to interrupt, sorry. Marshall or Simon, are you able to copy and paste the survey link into the Q&A?
I put it in the chat.
You put it in the chat. Okay.
I did, yeah.
Because we turned off the chat, I thought.
Probably, he's a host, so isn't he? Or co-host.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brandy.
We have a couple of families who are refusing to bring their child in for initial LPAC testing. Is there a leeway for this type of student if they remain to be determined even after 11/13? So I'm assuming, Erin, are you saying, well, there's a couple of potential questions I'm thinking that you're asking is, are we going to get in trouble if they're not tested by that time? And then secondly, if they're not tested by that time, but they're later discovered to be English learners, can we count them for funding? So right now, based on guidance that we've received from our LPAC office, only students where testing is completed by 11/13 will be included for purposes of LCFF funding. It's not clear to me, and Paula, I don't know if you have any, if you know anything different, but you know, how much leeway they're granting LEAs in terms of meeting that 75-day requirement.
Yeah, I think what they say is that you should continue to test even if you can't meet that requirement, basically. I think there's, in other words, I think they're giving some leeway.
Okay. So SIMP 60, we just changed it to a warning, but should those warnings be cleared is what someone's asking. So if the data integrity nut in me says anything, yes. To the extent that you can try and clear them. So SIMP 60 is basically where the initial US school enrollment date is inconsistent with the student's earliest enrollment in grades K through 12 in CalPADS. And so, but we have talked about potentially making these students' earliest CalPADS enrollment date available on the SSID extract at some point to assist you guys with this. We also talked to your vendors about helping implement some validations in your student information system so that when you're putting a date in that field and your student information system has information that the student has an earlier enrollment date, even if, you know, it's going back to kindergarten, because remember, we're capturing the earliest enrollment in grades kindergarten through 12th grade. If your SIS has that information, they will prevent you from putting a date that is after that date. So obviously they're warnings. You don't have to fix them. We would prefer that you correct the data.
Brandy, I found the bug on SPED 443. I was searching on 433, so that's
cool.
not going to work. And it is scheduled to be fixed in the next release, which is October 27th.
Okay, so 2 weeks. All right, so what about issues with exit code enrollment status validation for preschool students only being evaluated for SPED services? Previously, we had them as enrollment status 50 and exit code 170 was used. Now we're not able to use this combination. You indicated in your reply, preschool students should always be coded as primary. Use exit code 450. Does that include SPED? Yes. So preschool students, again, should always have a primary enrollment status, specifically if they are students with disabilities that are being evaluated or served by a district or county office of education. You should not use an enrollment status of 50 for preschool students. That enrollment status should be reserved solely for infants, toddlers, and private school students. Okay, that's the only time you should be using enrollment status 50. Okay, I get the GER 5 error for private school student who was assessed and was dropped as plan type 800, parent declined. Enrollment was then dropped as a no-show or never attend, so the enrollment was removed in CalPADS. The do not qualify record is triggering a GER 5 error. So we have a workaround for this, right, Angela? Which is temporarily remove the exit date and exit reason, submit up the SPED record, and then replace the exit date and no-show exit code.
Yeah, I missed which question you were on. I'm sorry. I was looking for something else.
It's the GER5 error, the ownership error when they've no-showed an enrollment because the parent declined, but they haven't sent up the SPED record yet. And
Yeah.
then try to send up the SPED record, and it's erroring out.
Yep. You're
Yep,
right.
you
Remove
had it.
the exit.
Yep. Establish ownership and then replace the exit date and exit reason when you're done. I have a question for the user who's concerned about SPED 443. And Brandy, I think you can probably explain it better than I can, but my understanding, it was a very specific scenario where the SELPA, the LEA had just recently changed SELPAs, right? That's when we're getting that error.
Right.
Typically.
Right. So SPED 443 happens when, most of the time, it's when charter schools are moving from one SELPA under their authorizer and they're becoming individual members of a SELPA. That's normally where we see the majority of these changes. And so initially, that error was triggering because the special education office had not completed all those updates. But now that that's done, there is another bug, and I'm not sure what they discovered, but from what I could see, well, it's probably not even worth discussing because it's back-end database logic that we need to out. But those updates have been made. We just know that now there's a defect on the way that is triggering and which LEA or SELPA it's associating that school with.
But the bottom line is it's not impacting LEAs that did not switch SELPAs.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, which is the majority, right?
Or it shouldn't be. Unless you're sending up a 15, 16 SPED record.
Right.
1415 was the one we saw yesterday. Going way back.
Okay. Let's see. I have 3 pending students with the 3 fields populated and no other. Sent a request to SACE. They're looking into it, but no follow-up. Is this a CalPADS fix? I don't remember the error code. So remember, if a student is pending, the #1 problem with those pending records that we see when they come up, and I don't know if you guys can concur with this, Martha and Angela, is that you guys are putting a meeting date in there. And if a student is pending evaluation, they haven't had a meeting. So take the meeting date out, even if the meeting date is planned, right? It's in the future. So for pending meetings, you should not have a meeting date populated. Though that's the most common error I see on pending records. Okay, so would we still be able to certify even if the TBD students are not tested? Oh, that's a good question, Erin.
Yep.
It's that 90-day thing. You know what, we're gonna have to talk about that internally because we may have to relook at length of that validation for this year. The length of time we're giving you. Okay, so we'll talk about this, Erin. Stay tuned. Would you please clarify if we can change English language acquisition status from EL to EO for parents who filled the HLS out incorrectly and just realized the student has a few years of LPAC scores? Okay, so oh my gosh, how do I answer this question without sparking 6 gajillion other questions? So there are specific, if the student took the initial LPAC, that's really important. So the student had to have taken the initial LPAC. If there is a correction that needs to be made based on specific statutory reasons, one of those reasons is that the home language survey was filled out incorrectly. Okay. Another one is that the district has discovered evidence for EL or IFEP. Another one is rotating score validation process. There's another one that the district, an ineligible student was tested. Okay, so based on guidance that we recently got from the LPAC office, okay, there are certain corrections that must be made within the same academic year as the initial is administered. So for example, in your example, the home language survey, if that parent came and said, I filled the home language survey out incorrectly, and the student has not taken the summative within that academic year, that same academic year, then you can submit that change to CalPADS using a correction code. But in this example, the student actually took the initial several years ago, and now the parent is saying, I filled out the home language survey incorrectly. That cannot be corrected. Okay, the corrections have to occur within the same academic year. Our program office recently gave us guidance, though, that in cases where an ineligible student was tested, meaning it was an administrative error, it was the district's fault, they tested a kid that never should have been tested in the first place, those corrections, as long as the student took the initial LPAC, can be made outside of the current academic year. However, in CalPADS, right now, the system does not allow that. So we're talking about potential change requests that would allow you to do that for that specific reason. And again, it's ineligible student tested is the only one that would allow for correction outside of the academic year in which the initial was taken. All others have to occur within the same academic year. Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer. What do we do if the kinder initial US enrollment date in CalPADS is before the student's 4th birthday? Is it because, well, I believe that we were, right now kindergartners can be 4 years old, but I'm wondering if in our validation, Martha and Angela, I can't remember, for that SIMP 60, if it's requiring the student to be 5 years old. Do we know?
Off the top of my head, no, because if they come from another state.
Yeah, the definition of that data element doesn't say anything about age. It just talks about grade.
And is it the other validation that has specific requirements for kindergarten students? Because I know if it's that validation, I know we do allow kindergarten students to be 4 years old now. So not sure. It should not trigger an error, Patty, but if it is, submit a ticket. Okay, so SIMP 60, I'm having an issue clearing students who have a US initial entry date less than the first California enrollment date. Yeah, this is what we've been talking about. Right now it's a warning. We know based on information in CalPADS that it's bad data, right? So we prefer that you clean it up. But again, we're also working on potentially adding the earliest enrollment in CalPADS date to the SSID extract. So that will give you some information on what that date should be.
But when they enrolled in another state and are coming to you, you can use when they were first enrolled outside of California, right? We just won't have that in CalPADS. We will have when they were first in CalPADS.
Right, yeah. So that earliest enrollment date in CalPADS is not an absolute, right? So if they were enrolled in another state, they were enrolled in kindergarten in another state at an earlier date, you should put that date rather than the enrollment in CalPADS. But sometimes the parent doesn't remember or you don't have the information. Right. So then in that case, you could use the earliest CalPADS enrollment date because that's what the validation is triggering on. Okay, so had an issue. Private school group student was enrolled, marked as a no-show, but it did not accept E170 or N470 as the exit code. So this also depends on the enrollment status.
Right.
So you can't use E170 for enrollment statuses other than 50. And I do know that a lot of you are using primary enrollments for private school students, and you shouldn't do that.
The other thing they're doing, Brandy, is putting preschool students at a private school with enrollment status 50.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so I was hoping you would talk about that because we get that one a lot.
Okay, so once again, preschool students, all preschool students must be on an IEP, okay? They cannot be on an ISP in preschool. So the only students that you should be putting in private school enrollments are students on ISPs, okay, individualized service plans. A preschool student should not be enrolled in a private school. Let's say they're only receiving services. They're not enrolled, they're preschool age, but they're not enrolled in a specific school within the district. You can enroll those students at the district level, but it has to be a primary enrollment, okay? So even if they're attending, let's say they're attending a private preschool and they're a preschool kid, they should not be enrolled in a private school. They need to be enrolled at the district level with a primary enrollment status. Does that answer the question?
So,
Okay, so you referred to statutory leave earlier in the Q&A. What is the definition of statutory leave? So there are certain, so essentially for statutory leave, the teacher of record, basically they still have their assignment, they still have their job. So there are certain reasons that a teacher has to leave that are defined in statute where they can actually retain their specific assignment. So if the teacher remains the teacher of record and they're on statutory leave, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing still wants you to report that teacher of record in the course record that's being reported to CalPADS, okay? The only time you're not gonna report the teacher of record is when there is no teacher of record, meaning it's a vacancy. And there's a long-term sub or short-term sub in there, and there is no teacher of record. Then you would report the seat of the substitute teacher. Ultimately, that would result in what's called a vacancy and ultimately a misassignment. Okay, so Cindy saying meeting date was not populated on the record. Yeah, Cindy, send in a service ticket so we can take a look at the specific record that you're talking about. Okay, so are you willing to address this one more time? Will the ISAAPP tool eventually integrate with CalPADS or SIS systems since there have been so many recent improvements to the tool this year? Kelly, we're working with ETS on some possible integration, but we can't tell you much about it because we haven't actually had a really in-depth conversation with the vendor about it. They've just put out some indications that they want to develop some type of integration. Can a parent change race for their student? I know changing the English language acquisition status is discouraged and extra documentation is needed, but this is the first. In 5th grade, parent wants to totally change the race. Yes. We actually see it all the time. Right, Martha?
yeah.
Yeah, they can change it if they want to. It's their prerogative. Okay, if the initial LPAC needs to be reopened in the data entry interface for a student due to an entry error, what is the process to change the ELAS back to TBD in order for the student's test to become accessible again in TOMS? We were informed the change to TBD by Caltech. Okay, so first of all, you have to put in a STARS request in TOMS to have the test results nullified, right? So what ends up happening is in some cases, the test vendor actually sends a record to delete the existing EL or IFEP record, whatever's in there. Okay, so in some cases, the test vendor can actually delete the record. If there's an existing TBD record that was there before, then that will be the remaining record, and then they can assign the new scores. But in some really specific cases, we've seen instances where the test vendor actually can't do it, and it's usually the result of a mid-merge. So that's why Paula talked about earlier the fact that you guys need to be paying attention when you are enrolling your kindergarten students and make sure you don't assign a different student identifier to that kid, because what ends up happening particularly if the student took the initial LPAC at another LEA under a different SSID, it's going to be really problematic in trying to get that new ELAS and even the test scores associated with the correct SSID. Okay, but again, the test vendor in some instances can delete the EL or IFEP record and then the TBD and the new scores and ELAS to the correct to the student's SSID.
Right, and so Brandy, there, the test vendor is implementing a short-term solution to this, but until, and it may be in already, I'm not sure, but we'll have to talk to them more about whether or not it addresses the MIDs that were already there and stuff like that. So we'll get more information and provide it out. But in the meantime, it's just best practices anyway to avoid those MIDs.
Right. So we've got a couple more on the Synth 60 that's saying it's not clearing students with earlier dates. So just to clarify, the date that, so you're submitting an initial US school enrollment date, and that error is triggering based on a student's earliest enrollment in CalPADS. That doesn't mean earliest enrollment with your LEA. It means earliest enrollment period. So if the initial US school enrollment date is after that earliest date in CalPADS that's in the operational data store for that student, then you're going to get this error. Now, having said that, the other thing is earliest enrollment in K-12. A lot of you are also putting preschool enrollment dates. Preschool does not apply here. We're only looking at K-12 enrollment dates. So if based on the student's birth date, they could not have been at least 4 years old, then that's probably why you may be getting errors with these earlier dates. But if that's still not the issue, send in a service ticket. Okay, I have a kinder, this is a common question, so actually this is a really good one. I have a kinder mom who withdrew her student saying she was not ready for kindergarten. What exit should I use? I get an error with 450. I think that you guys were recommending E400, Angela?
As an alternative
Yeah.
for the exit? Yeah.
But we also are having discussions about potentially including, allowing you to use E450 for kindergarten students. So
Right, Paula mentioned it on one of the early slides, but that wouldn't be done for this year. What I think we did was change the definition of E400 to
Yes.
call out that it's acceptable for students under the age of 5.
Not compulsory anymore.
So you would just use E400 in those cases. Okay, so Brandy, we're getting conflicting information because we're being told that students as young as 3 can be on IFSPs now. Yeah, so Corey, they can be on IFSPs, but preschoolers should be on IEPs. Is that what we're talking about here, Corey? So if what I'm saying is contradictory, just send me.
Said yes.
Okay. So this is something I'm going to have to talk to Shiloh about because this is news to me.
And we're down to the last 10 minutes.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so since we must now submit SIMP records for private school group, do we need to submit SELA records as well? No, you don't have to submit SELA records for private school students because they don't take the initial LPAC because they are in private school. Okay, so Kelly says this is just for a score correction. The stairs case was already approved. We just need TBD ELAS to be reflected again. So Kelly, this is probably one of those instances that Paula was talking about where the ETS is looking at a solution for this. So stay tuned. I have a student whose last name exceeds the 30 character limit. What's the
Wow.
policy of this issue?
It won't get in.
I think they're just making up questions now. They're trying to stump you, Brandy.
Well,
You got to send in a ticket
Mhm.
on that because it is what it is. The rule says 30 characters. This is the first time we've seen that, right?
We probably have seen it before. It's probably just the first 30 characters populated.
Yeah, well, that's all it could be.
Right, and what else are we gonna say?
I don't think that it happens often enough that we would modify the character.
I feel like we've had that conversation before and we dismissed it.
I agree. So if we use E400 to exit the kinder student, can the ERD be resolved come next year if the student enrolls in a California public school? Sure. You would just have to use the T160.
Change the E400 that you put in to a T160 because they later returned.
Yeah, but I mean, ERDs don't, even though it's best practice to go ahead and update them where necessary, there are some instances where you don't want to update the exit reason. So one of those is like truancy, right? Let's say you exit a student with an E140 and then they end up showing up either back to the same school or they show up at another school. And so you're getting an ERD that says, oh, there's an exit reason discrepancy because you have an E140 for this student and they showed back up. Well, my question to you is you have to be logical about it, right? Or well, it's not a question, it's more of a statement. You have to be logical about it. Was the student truant? The answer is yes. They were nowhere to be found. They showed up 2 months later. So in that case, I don't want to change that E140 because it's right. It's right. In this case, E400 is being used because the parent chose to voluntarily withdraw the student because kindergarten is not compulsory. So you may not need to change that E400 is what I'm saying.
We don't include the ERDs in our anomaly rate for the submissions, so just be aware. It's more to help clean up data in case it's, misreported.
To address Caitlin's concern, she's getting the SPED 443 because she did switch SELPAs. So we do have that bug marked as high, Caitlin, and we understand that people can't get data in because of that validation. So if we do get a fix sooner than the 27th, that would be one that we recommend for a patch to go into production prior to the next release.
So Cheryl's receiving an ERD for preschool students using E450. So you can leave E450. And why would they be receiving an ERD? That's weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
So if that's the case, we'll probably have to take a look at that because it seems like generating an ERD for an E450 is sort of silly.
So we need a ticket and an SSID it's happening on, Cheryl.
That would be good. Okay, let's see, we've got about 5 minutes. I have to drop all my private school students from last year and have to add them all back this year with a new start date. Does SACE have to now have a new start date also?
Enrollments, you have to exit out enrollments every year. I think that's
Yeah.
what she's referring to.
But maybe you should, this is a good plug for our problem that we saw in the data, right? I don't know if you remember, Martha.
I haven't worked on it yet. I saw the email.
Oh, the overlapping one, or?
Oh, this is,
131.
Oh, they weren't exiting kids.
yeah.
At the private schools, yeah.
So what we found in LEAs across the state is for your private school enrollments, generally we have a certification error that triggers if you haven't exited your students. If they have a start date in the current academic year, and if you have not exited them as of 8/15 of the current academic year, you should get a certification validation error that says, hey, exit this kid. It wasn't triggering correctly for a bunch of private school students. So remember, if you have students that are enrolled in private school, any private school enrollment, they have to be exited every year and re-enrolled the following year.
But SACE doesn't necessarily have to change and have a new start date, do they?
Correct, yeah. We don't take the enrollment start date from SACE. We actually take it from the student information system. And so they have to be re-enrolled annually.
And for preschool kids, is that like, or private schools year round? And so you would just end it on June 30th and then start a new one in the new year on July 1st?
Yeah. That's a good suggestion. Okay, so why is secondary enrollment exit reason E170 allowed for all grades except preschool? It is allowed, oh, well, preschool, because preschoolers are always on IEPs. Students on IEPs must always have a primary enrollment status. Okay, so if they have a primary enrollment status, you can't exit them with a secondary enrollment exit, right? Because they're primary. That's the reason, Angela.
I think what's happening, Brandy, I've had a couple of users doing this. So within their school district, they have two different schools providing different services for the student. And so they're wanting to report both, one as a primary and one as a secondary. And I think you addressed it at the Q&A the other day that just get rid of the secondary for the preschool purposes. We're only looking at the reporting LEA, and it doesn't really matter where they are physically.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So we have preschool students not on IEPs. So Angela, what are they on if they're not on IEPs?
Did she send in a ticket? This is Angela Maida that she's asking, not Angela Ratty.
Yeah.
Angela Ratty doesn't know the answer to that question.
I do not.
Okay, so Jamie's saying, I'm currently getting a Cert 4 error for a student who is not currently enrolled with us. I also don't see this error on the known issues. So Cert 4.
That's the ethnicity on the SIMF record. So it may be a previous SIMF, but would we be looking at SIMF records outside of?
I have seen that before, and it was kind of a wacky data scenario. So Jamie, if you want to put in a ticket, you can ask for me, this is Angela, and provide the SSID, please, and we'll take a look.
Okay, so I think I understand Angela Mata's question. So Angela, you might be talking about your general education preschool students. So I would urge you, in cases where you have a general education preschool student, to use a primary enrollment status. Here's the reason why. Remember that for some of our categorical programs, they use students who are eligible ages 3 to 21. Homeless is one big one, right? So if you have a homeless student that is a preschool student and they're from ages 3 to 21, you want to use a primary enrollment status because the other enrollment statuses don't count in the reports for homeless, okay? So that's why it's important to use primary enrollment statuses for preschool students, gen ed, and even students with disabilities that are preschool. You should always use primary. They're enrolled in 2 different preschools at the same time. You should definitely report primary on one. They should at least have a primary, but you don't necessarily need the secondary one. And report is necessary.
So it's 12:31 now. Do you want to take any more? Wrap this up? Anybody that didn't get their questions answered, send in a ticket.
Well, I think we answered pretty much all of them. I think we got there.
Yeah,
All right.
we have 280 people that stuck it
Still.
out with us, the long haulers. Good job, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Guys, great job.
Thanks, Brandy, Paula.
Thanks.